Hey everybody, I'm here with my good friend Angel. We just met the other day. I watched him have an interesting conversation with our friend Dr. Roger Graham, and we decided to have a little follow up conversation. That would be pretty fun. Want to introduce yourself, say anything?
Hey, what do you want me to
Perfect.
say?
I don't know. Seemed like the polite thing to say. So, oh man, I should have been slightly more prepared. Let's see. This will take all of 3 seconds to rectify, I hope. I just wanted to pull up the document that I wrote up on it a little bit. So we're gonna be talking about like free speech. I know you said you didn't like the term like free speech absolutist. Would you want to just clarify real quick what your issue with that term is?
Uh, well, I mean, I just realized that people have tons of different definitions for that. They interpret it all these different ways that I didn't mean. And when a term is something that you have to argue about for 20 minutes before you can get to the thing the term is supposed to be talking about,
Yeah.
I feel like the term is basically useless. So, um, you know, I can qualify it and I can say, I just basically think that anybody should be able to say whatever they want, and anybody should be able to say whatever they want about it. That it's just, it's a completely open highway in both directions.
So
And
what? What are the things you usually have to qualify about that? Because like that's what I would assume is what it means when they say like free speech or sorry free speech absolutist.
yeah, I mean, that's what I thought. But then, I tweeted about that. I said, I consider myself a free speech absolutist in that, anyone should be able to say whatever, and anyone should be able to say whatever about it. And, I added a couple of things after that. But I don't know. People have a very weird way of approaching that word. They seem to think that if there are consequences of any kind, then it's not actually free speech, which doesn't make any sense to me. Because like you either, I mean, why would you want inconsequential speech? Like, why would you want nothing to happen for the
Um,
things you say? And then there's just no such thing as like behavior without consequences. Everything has consequences.
so
Doesn't
I
mean that you're not free.
Well, so usually when we're talking about like free speech, right, it's like the constitutional guarantee, and the constitutional guarantee is your protection from the government for speech that you convey.
Sure.
Now, in that sense, like I don't want there to be criminal penalties for most types of speech, like
Mhm.
almost everything, pretty much. Now, saying there should be like civil penalties or social consequences, I think are different things, right? And the issue, like someone like me, I guess, would take with like the term like free speech absolutist is it comes off. A lot of people use it, and I won't say this about you because I don't think you're doing it. Used as this kind of like I'm gonna say like a cudgel, basically, of like, oh, like I'm a free speech absolutist. I stand on principle, and you just like hate freedom or you hate free speech. And it's like, no, I don't. Like, it's not how that works. But so I guess I'd say like you. I enjoy. I think we should have free speech protections, but I think like saying like we need to. I'm trying to think how I'd qualify this a little bit better. That I think it's weird to like describe it as free speech like that if you can like face consequences. Some people think like you should have like consequence free speech, like oh people are canceling people on the internet for saying bad things or whatever. I don't know what's with this lighting situation. I don't know how I messed this up. It's very strange. See how
Oh,
my face is like really white on this?
yeah.
It's very odd. I don't know. It's throwing me off, but it's okay. Um,
Well, yeah. I mean, I just that doesn't make any sense to me. It doesn't make any sense to why would you even want that? Why would you want speech that had no effect, right?
yeah.
Like that's the whole point of it. The whole point is you want to be able to express your ideas and have it
It's actually an
matter
interesting
to
way of
somebody.
putting it. Like, if there was no consequence for your speech, then like your speech would have to be like fundamentally meaningless, right? Because you want your words to convey like a meaning and enact like some sort of like message or change or whatever. So if there were
Right.
no social consequences one way, then why would you expect them to be in the other way? Like, you can't expect it to be a one way street. I never thought
Right.
about
Like
it that way.
it's kind of. I mean, I don't want to caricature it, but it just seems like you only want people to just hear you and either agree or say nothing. I'm not sure. It just doesn't make any sense to me.
Well,
Like the point
yeah,
of the idea, as far as I understand it, is you want to say what you think,
mm.
and you want it to matter in the world, right? You want it to have some kind of consequence. You want it to have some kind of effect. That effect is not guaranteed to be a good one, right? It's you can say whatever you think, whatever you want, and other people are going to have opinions, and they're going to push back. They're going to criticize you. They're going to tell you you're an asshole. Whatever it is they want to say, that's them exercising the exact same thing in the other direction.
Okay,
So,
so
and I'm fine with all of that.
okay, so like, you know, like that gets to the classic example of screaming like fire in a crowded movie theater or something like that, right? Or let's do like a direct like call to violence. Like, let's say instead of Trump saying, I don't know, I guess one time he said do this peacefully in a 45-minute hate screed, but he worked the word peaceful in there at one point in time. Let's just say he left that out and he just said like let's go like attack the Capitol, and then people attack the Capitol. You know, like you're fine with there being like legal consequences for behavior like that, right?
Yeah, I mean, if he literally said, go kill this guy, and somebody kills the guy, I mean,
Yeah, it's like they classic, like, you know, let's say like the issue with someone like Trump is like you have like that mafia don, like this is not a revolutionary
sure.
comparison that he talks like a mafia guy. We're like, oh, I wish you could like do me a favor and just like take care of this guy, you know. And it's like you know what he means by take care of it. Like there's no ambiguity here in like the way we understand language. The only ambiguity is in like, well, did he literally say kill this person? Well, no, but you know he
Right.
meant that,
But
you
I
know.
think, yeah, and I see that, but I think that our systems are calibrated correctly in that that's not enough to convict him of something. If he just goes, I wish you would take care of it, like that's not enough. And I think it's good that that's our standard, because it prevents us from making a really catastrophic error, right? And that's not to say that we don't already make a million catastrophic errors in a million other different ways in the the
Mm-hmm.
justice system. It's not perfect at all, but I'm speaking specifically about just this one thing. You know, like for example, like to get a little nerdy here, right? The Zodiac killer.
Mm-hmm.
I was like obsessed with that for a little while. I read like all the books and all this stuff. Dude, Arthur Lee Allen did that shit. Like as far as everything I've read,
Hmm.
every single arrow points to this one guy, but they just couldn't get him, and it's because all the evidence was circumstantial. And it's absolutely right that they never arrested him. It's absolutely right, even though I would put all my money on the fact that he did it, right?
Hmm.
Because there must be a higher standard for our judicial process. There just has to be, and I'm okay with you know regrettably letting people that I just know are guilty, just letting them go in order to preserve that standard. So yeah, like Trump, obviously, I think he's responsible for all that shit. But you know, like the thing about being the good guys is that you have to follow the rules. It's part of what makes you the good guys, and that means your job is harder.
Yeah.
And sometimes they're gonna get away because you have to follow the rules. And the minute you start bending them, the minute you start going under the table and doing some stuff because you are so sure, that's when the whole structure falls apart. So bringing it back, I mean, you know yeah, like legal consequences, that's why I think it's something like slander laws, or something like,
Mm-hmm.
if somebody calls somebody else like a child molester or something, right? That's a toxic, horrible thing to call somebody. That's something nobody ever wants to be associated with. And let's say this person owns a business, people stop patronizing his business. Those are material damages. This person can now sue the other guy for defamation, and it has material consequences, right? But he
Mm-hmm.
can't just sue the guy for calling him a child molester,
Yeah.
like on the street. That doesn't do anything, and it's protected. It's just the way it is, right? And you can call the guy an asshole, you can dispute it, you can go back and forth on Twitter or whatever, right? And some people are going to believe you, some people are not. For many people, the mere accusation is radioactive enough, and you're never going to get that stink off of you, and there are consequences, and you can never make the other person pay for it. It's just the way it is. You get smeared with this thing, and it's even if you went through an entire legal process and were exonerated, there would still be people who wouldn't believe it, right?
Yeah.
Because just the minute you have that accusation, right? But that's just one of those things that we unfortunately have to live with,
Mm-hmm.
because we're trying to protect this higher ideal.
Yeah, like for like a greater good. I can understand that. Are you familiar with like Jordan Peterson by any chance?
Yeah, I'm familiar with them. Yeah.
Like the whole C16 thing. That's what he became
Yes.
famous for. I can give a quick summary if you want. Oh, I
Yeah,
guess I'll do it since it's recording anyway. Basically,
it's
hmm?
I
Um,
know it's vague in my memory, but yeah.
Yeah, so I could be a little off on the characterization here, but basically Canada was passing Bill C-16. C-16 was going to amend their Ontario Human Rights Council, which is basically just like their version of protected classes, to include trans people in as a protected class.
Hmm.
And he was like, "Oh, you're making it illegal to like misgender people," which was sort of true, but it's like it's illegal to do that in protected like instances. Like just like I can't refuse to house somebody, refuse to educate them for being black or a woman. You now can't do that for them being trans. Like that's the same idea. And Jordan Peterson fundamentally didn't seem to understand that, despite it being explained to him probably multiple times. But
Mm.
um, are you generally would you be okay with laws like protected classes, or do you think that's not okay?
Uh,
So like a
I
small business owner would like apply to somebody like you can't refuse service someone for being like gay, black, trans, or whatever.
oh yeah. I'm not sure if it's, I'm not a legislator. I'm not a
Yeah, well, just
professional.
like roughly how you feel. I mean, I'm not
Yeah, I'm
gonna
not a
hold your feet to the fire on
professional.
this. Not that.
Yeah, I'm not a professional of any kind. I'm no expert. This is just me reasoning my way through things, right?
Mm-hmm.
But like for example, the gay wedding cake people,
Yeah.
right? That happened a while ago. These this gay couple wanted a cake made, and the business owners refused to do it on their religious grounds or whatever. I think that's idiotic. I don't believe what they believe. I think they're wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not sure if legislating against that is necessarily a smart thing. Because generally speaking, legislation is a very blunt tool,
Mm-hmm.
and it's very slow to change, and it's just clunky. And I feel like, you know, yeah, I mean, there are ways where it would become more complicated, but if I were in that situation and somebody refused to bake me a cake, I wouldn't want them to bake me the cake anyway. Like if
Mm-hmm.
somebody said, "Oh, I don't want to bake you this cake because you're gay," I would say, "Okay, you're an asshole," and I would just walk out, and I wouldn't want to patronize them. And if I heard about that, I wouldn't want to patronize them, you know, on those grounds. I
Mm-hmm.
would just say, "Yeah, I don't want to shop there because they hate gay
Yeah,
people."
well, I think with like a wedding cake, it's a little bit easier, right? That's clearly like a delicacy, for lack of a better term. What's the word I'm looking for? It's you don't need a wedding cake, basically. But let's say like you live in some podunk town, right? And
Right,
there's one grocery store, and the next grocery store 45 minutes away.
right,
Now, if that person's like, I'm not going to serve you because you're gay, right? Like, I'm
right.
not going to ring you out. Like, we'd probably have an issue with that, right? Or do you think like that's just like
Yeah, I mean,
move out of town, or
no, no. Like, see, that's the thing. Like, I'm not. I think there's a certain amount of callousness to people who say, vote with your feet. Just move somewhere else where people like you.
you know?
You're totally discounting the fact that maybe this person grew up here, their entire family's here, their job is here. Like,
Mm,
you're telling them to uproot because other people are being assholes. So, I mean, again, I'm not a legal expert or anything like that, but I imagine that in that case, you'd be able to file some kind of civil suit or something like that, and then it would get arbitrated that way.
Well, yeah,
And I
it's more
guess,
should we have rules that disallow that behavior in general? Like that's a philosophical question, right? Our laws reflect our like philosophical moral beliefs. So if
yeah,
we think this is a desirable behavior, or we think we should allow people to do something like that, like that's the sort of like the balance we would take. I
yeah,
fall on either side of like the cake issue. Like depending on when you talk to me, I've
right.
defended it against like left people. Like yeah,
I mean, it's just,
eh,
I
but
think it's probably just, you know, not necessarily easier, but it seems like a smoother way to go about it, to just let the court of public opinion just think these people are douchebags, and
yeah.
you know, and just not patronize their business because they don't want to associate with somebody like that. Of course, there are a lot of ways that can very quickly get out of hand, right? Because then it's like, oh, you voted Republican, I don't want to patronize your business, and that's, people can put that on a continuum there and say, yeah, that's just as bad. Being a Republican is just as bad because I wholeheartedly believe that Democrats are better and Republicans are evil and all this stuff. You can have, you can do this all day. And so this is
Well,
basically my
well, we
thing
should
is,
stigmatize some behavior, right? I think it's like how we choose what we stigmatize is what's important.
yeah. But I also think that we need to be careful. Um, we need to be careful not to be too trigger happy with what we stigmatize and how we stigmatize it, because it can very quickly get out of hand. And so that, I mentioned this a lot in my conversation with Rod, and it's something that I talk about a lot, and it's we have to be compassionate,
Mm.
because we have to understand that, going back to the wedding cake thing, just because it's a simpler example to frame this principle around. These people are, maybe they're like super devout Catholics, right? They go to church every week.
Mm.
They don't mean anybody any harm necessarily, right? Um, they grew up with this. It's the program they're running in their head, and the program they're running in their head tells them gay people are rebelling against God, and they're sinners, and we shouldn't associate with them, right? It's a perfectly understandable line of reasoning given their priors.
Yeah.
Right? So so when I approach something like that personally, I would say, yeah, I think what they're doing is wrong. I see why they're doing it though. And it's not, they're just pure evil and hateful and they want to ruin everybody's day. It's more complicated than that, right? So I would still, still probably not want to go patronize them, right? I would buy my cake somewhere else. Um, but the justification for hating them because they oppose me for their beliefs just disappears in my head, because I just realized, look, if I grew up where they grew up, if I grew up how they grew up, if the things that
Yeah,
happened,
you like we would do the same. You'd be the same person, right? Like
I
no
would be
one's
the same.
stronger than the system that they.
Exactly. I
Yeah.
would be I would be exactly the same person, doing the same things, believing the same things. The only reason I'm not is because I was born somewhere else and learned other things, and
Mm.
had different parents and different friends and environments and all that stuff. So that's the thing. So we can stigmatize behavior, and it's a kind of, hate the sin, not the sinner thing,
Mm.
right? So we can stigmatize behavior, and we can do our best to try to persuade people and change it, and understand where they're coming from and try to use that in our trying to fix things, right?
Mm.
And then there are things that are overarching, right? Like you can't, refuse to hire people because of their race or because of their gender or things like that. Like that's just an overarching rule that we have to have, and I think that's fine.
Well, what I would say is I wanted to like move into that example, and I guess to detour real quick. There's a quote I really like from this guy named Michael Brooks. He passed away like 6 months ago, unfortunately. But it's um like basically it's like love people and be brutal to systems, right? Like all these people who vote for Trump, like I don't hate them.
Yeah,
Like I'm someone who views like Trumpism as like a form of fascism, I guess, or whatever. It's an incarnation of fascism. Fascism is designed to emotionally manipulate you, have you running and operating off of fear. And when you're scared, you run to someone who says they're going to protect you. Oh, we're the party of law and order. Oh, the immigrants are going to come here and take your vacation houses, like whatever. Um, it's unreasonable for you to expect that propaganda wouldn't work on most people. That's what it's designed to do. Like, how are you supposed to be above those psychological callings? So, I don't really have any animosity towards like the average Trump supporter.
yeah,
Now, just because like if you have these crazy beliefs, you fall in line with this, and then you do a horrific thing, like you're gonna have to get like punished and whatever. But
sure.
it's not
Yeah,
because I hate you. It's because like you're causing harm. Like that's all there is to
right.
it.
We have to
Um,
mitigate harm. Yeah,
yeah, so I hate the like my animosity is reserved and my hatred is reserved for like establishment Republicans, like a lot of Democrats too, and the systems that I think abuse people and make their lives worse. That's where like the intense hatred comes from. But besides that, for the average individual, it's like pure compassion. It's just like, yeah, I get it.
yeah,
Like a lot of people don't want to admit it, and like I'll say this every fucking time. If we all grew up in Nazi Germany, guess what, man? We'd be zig hollering, like 9 out of 10 of us would be doing it, and no one wants to think that, like, oh, in another
yeah,
universe you'd be a Nazi, but guess what, motherfucker, you would be.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. Everybody, I mean, everybody wishes that they were
mm,
they were the one to say no, and they're the hero that gets burned at the stake and whatever.
yeah, everyone wants to imagine their. Oh shoot, I'm trying to remember the name. I want to say Rosa Luxemburg. That's not the name I'm looking for. It's like the White Rose Society people who like stood up, handed out pamphlets, and got executed. They're all like, "Yeah, I'll be that person." I'm like, "Nah, you'd be the
Right.
person
And
behind the gun, most
and I mean,
likely."
yeah, and I mean
Yeah.
that's good. That's an aspiration. That's good.
Well,
But
you should. So I think
in
it's
all
like.
likelihood,
Mm,
in all likelihood, like you're probably gonna go along with the environment. Like
yeah.
fish don't know they're wet. Like you're just kind of
Yeah.
blowing along, and a lot of people don't really think about what they're in and what they're contributing to. And I mean,
Yeah.
it's the way it is. And it doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. It just means there are these external forces that are very powerful.
The distinction I guess I'd make is I'd say we all want to believe we'd better be the better person, and we would not do the horrific thing. But I think there's a difference between like wanting to think that you wouldn't do that and then knowing that you wouldn't do that. You know, like there are
Right.
people whose certainty, like your certainty, is what scares me, right? Because I'm not certain. Okay, I think I'm a pretty good person. I think I try and do the right thing. You know,
Right.
like more often than not, I think I'm a pretty decent person. Um, but like that's what keeps me in check, right? I always question my behavior because I'm like, well, fuck, what if I'm wrong here?
Right.
Like, what if I'm the baddie? You know, like I have to always evaluate positions because like I don't want to be in that position. But someone who is certain, like, well, if you're certain, why are you evaluating anything? Like, why look into anything if you're certain of it?
Right.
Um,
I mean, I Am Legend. Not spoiler alert, well, it's a half spoiler alert because it wasn't the ending that anybody actually saw unless you got the DVD. But the original ending
hmm.
of that movie is, he's fighting these zombies and they're coming after him and all this stuff, right? And he's taking he's kidnapping some of them and he's doing experiments to try to figure out how to cure this disease that caused, whatever. And he's finally cornered and he's behind this pane of glass and the head zombie is banging on the glass and staring at him, and then he puts his hand on the glass and he makes a little butterfly print with
Hmm.
his hand, right? So he
This,
does this little thing here, and in that moment, Will Smith's character sees that, and he flashes back. One of the zombies that he kidnapped had a butterfly tattoo on her body, and then he realizes, oh, they're only here to like save their friends. To them, I am the monster. I'm the one who's been stealing, their friends and family and torturing them by doing these experiments. This entire time, I've been thinking that I'm the sole good person in the universe, and I'm trying to save these people and I'm trying to cure this disease. And all they see is I'm the monster. I'm this thing that they have to defeat because I'm threatening their way of life.
that's
And
actually what's
that's
up. The
why
original ending is just a Rambo thing, right? Like he just like starts murdering
yeah, it's
zombies and
stupid.
some. That
Yeah, it's
original
stupid.
ending sounds really good.
I mean, but it's idiotic because it's Hollywood. But like that's why the movie's called I Am Legend,
Mm-hmm.
is because he realizes in that moment he is the ghost story for these people.
Mm-hmm.
He's the monster. It's him, and so he sacrifices himself. He saves the people that he's with, and he sacrifices himself because he realizes what he has done. And that's the whole point of the story. So they changed the movie to
Just ruining with this guy. This guy's excellent writing and book that had like a really cool moral to it. Like you don't know you're the monster until you
right.
like the monsters don't usually realize they're the monster. that's
Yeah, I mean it's
that's a shit. That's a
certainty.
shit. That's a crazy moral to like lose or
Yeah, and I
to
mean
lose by retelling
I
that.
get it. You don't want to walk out of a movie thinking, "Whoa, Will Smith was the bad guy the whole time."
Well, yeah.
But
If you want your
but
movie to be something people talk about 30 years from now, you want that.
exactly.
You know, not if they had that original ending. I
Also,
feel like I would have liked that movie. I don't know.
yeah, exactly.
Maybe
And
not.
also
I don't know.
just
I was like
you
13
know,
when it came out.
don't
Maybe I was an
adapt
idiot.
don't adapt that book if you don't want the ending. Like the whole point is the ending. So but anyway, the point is that that's what happens when you're so certain of your being right and just and
Hmm.
good, right? You have to second guess everything. You have to question what you're doing. You have to make sure that you're not missing something. So I am perpetually uh, unconfident in my own uh, correctness. Like I'm constantly worried that I've missed something, and I'll share this with you. I've told a few people this. I'm not sure if I said it on any kind of video or anything, but 100% of the time, and I'm not exaggerating. I mean 100%. 100% of the time that I have decided, you know what, fuck this guy. I'm gonna tell him off because I'm sick of being walked on. I'm sick of being, quiet and just letting people say whatever they want to me. Whatever that that thing is, where it's
Hmm.
like I'm tired of taking shit. I'm finally gonna stand up for myself. Fuck this guy. This guy's gonna get all my rage that I've pent up from being the guy who gets walked on. Right. Every single time that I've snapped and I've done something like that, I was wrong. There was something that I misunderstood. There was something that I didn't know. There was something that I misinterpreted because of my own insecurity and my own whatever. And I feel guilty about every single one of those things. So now, after having done that, countless times and always being wrong, now I have this almost reflex of the minute I get a thought, the minute I think I understand something, I immediately stop I have this reflex where I pause and I try to think of every possible other explanation that could lead me to this point, that could explain the situation in a different way. And so I almost never walk into anything thinking I know what's going on. I think that's just a better way to be. It makes me a little bit, it makes me a little bit like awkward and maybe, lacking a little bit of conviction. Though, if you watch my Twitter, I think people think I'm much more arrogant than I actually am. Um, but that's only because I don't make arguments unless I've really thought it through.
I run into that
Right.
like
So
I run into that same issue where it's like when I talk about something, like I tend not to talk out of my ass. Like I tend to know a lot about the things I'll talk about because the things I
right.
don't know a lot about, I shut the
Yeah.
fuck up on. So people are like,
And I still could be wrong, right? But
mm,
but it's just, if I seem very strident and if I seem very confident in what I'm
yeah,
saying, it's because I've been talking about it for years. So like with this free speech thing, like I've run it in my head just countless times, and I've heard everything I can think of. I've tried to come up with every counter argument, and I've tried to make sure that I understand the situation. And
mm,
it's, or I'm an atheist, and one of those things that just happens is like you hear every possible argument for the existence of God, right? Eventually you run out of them because there's only so many. And you just, you hit that one and you go, "Oh wow, okay, let me think about that." And then you find some kind of hole in it and you go, "Oh, okay." And then it falls apart and then you find the next one. And eventually you run out of them, right? So
yeah,
now it's like you can convince me that there's a God, maybe, it's possible, but it would take some serious work.
yeah.
Like, because at this point, I've heard all the arguments, I've heard all the logic, and it all is like circular, and so it's similar to that. But like, generally speaking, I try my best to um, say, if I don't know what I'm talking about, I'm just deciding to muse about something,
Mm.
I'll make sure to qualify it and say, "Look, I don't know a lot about this, or I haven't thought about this too much, but this is what it looks like to me right now, just for the sake of having a conversation." Um,
Yeah,
but
there's
the
a.
certainty is the problem.
Do you know who Destiny is? He's some like YouTuber or whatever, streamer or whatever.
No, I don't think so.
He's some like video gamer turned like political figure, but he's got a pretty large platform. I had a conversation with him once, and the issue I ran into is like when you're doing public platforms, you have to like balance like optics and effective messaging versus like being honest and good faith.
Hmm.
And I'll always lean towards being honest and good faith, like assuming like I'm getting that reciprocation from the other person. So I had a conversation with him, and in it we were talking about the George Zimmerman case. And I read some of the YouTube comment section. It got like 50 or 80,000 views or something. So I'm reading the YouTube comment section afterwards. People were like, "Oh, he wasn't very confident about like the facts of the George Zimmerman case because he kept saying like I'm pretty sure of this," and it's like I was right about every single thing I said, and I knew I was right, but like I worded it like that because I'm like I'm not gonna like lie to you and say like I just like reread the whole case before I was having this
Right.
conversation. I knew a lot about it 8 years ago. I still know a lot about it. I'm right about every single claim I'm gonna make on it, but like I'll hedge it because I'm not trying to lie to you, and I'm just trying to like because I have like I feel like saying academic background is weird. Like I'm in a master's program, finishing my master's degree,
Yeah.
and you learn to speak in this like caveated manner and not say like absolute sentences, and I
Yeah.
feel like it makes conversations more like bearable, less ideologic. But like even like this was to a left leaning audience, and even to people like that, you have them thinking like, oh, I don't know what I'm talking about. It's like it's not that I don't know what I'm talking about. It's that like I'm trying to
Yeah.
be like good faith here.
Yeah.
So
Well, I think if people are looking for that, then
mm,
they're not as interested in hearing the opposing point of view as they could be. Like, if they just want somebody to be super strident,
mm,
I don't know what their motivation is to say what they said, but I mean, I'm totally fine with someone saying, "I'm not totally sure about this. I'm pretty sure the number is this or whatever." Like, because you know it's just, you're giving off this sense of humility. Like,
mm,
you're not a robot. You're not just spitting out facts. And if you do know, go ahead. If you are 100% certain, go ahead. And if you turn out to be wrong, just say, "Yeah, okay, you're right. I fucked that up."
mm.
I don't know. There's another. That's another thing. It's just, be okay with being wrong. It's totally fine. It's actually the best thing that could possibly happen to you is to be wrong, because you have now been spared a lifetime of being a fool about this particular thing.
What's funny is like I feel like that's like a trait that I think I learned like in college is like learning to enjoy being wrong is very difficult for a lot of people.
It
Like
is.
it's an opportunity to have more information to be better. It's that's
Right.
the opportunity. When you find out you're wrong, it's like, oh cool, I get to be better. Like I had some like weird argument. This was not too long ago about like I never said I disagreed with this. It was a female like coworker of mine saying like, oh, like we have like a finite number of eggs. I'm like, you have a finite number? Like that doesn't sound right. I feel like your body just decays over time, and that's why you no. Like apparently women really do have like a finite number of eggs they're born with. I just had no idea. And I
Yeah.
was like, oh, cool. Like, I was like, and I said to her, I was like, that doesn't sound right to me. And she's like, it's 100% right. And I was like, I'm not telling you that you're wrong, but that sounds ridiculous. And I looked up, I'm like, oh shit, the ridiculous
Yeah.
thing was true.
Yeah.
But it's, I don't know. It's just, it's like, yeah, it's an opportunity to learn. Like, I don't know. I'm never
And it's,
mad to be like wrong about something that's counterintuitive. It's great.
yeah, I mean, I think it's, because especially with certain things, people identify with their beliefs, and they are become a part of who they are, which I think is
Mm,
a mistake. Like I
yeah.
think it's not even just a mistake. It's an illusion, because if you found out you were wrong about something, some deeply held belief, you're still you the next day. It's
Mm,
different. You're going to feel different. A lot of stuff's going to change probably, right? But you're still who you are. So, I likened it to like clothes that you used to wear, right? Like you're under no obligation to continue to wear the same clothes you wore 10 years ago. Those are just the clothes you wore. You were still you then. You're still
yeah.
you now. You can change your clothes. Ideas and beliefs are like, they're kind of like that. There could be things that you wear forever because they fit you really well and you like them and all that stuff. And then there are other things that just, they go out of style for you. You just, maybe they're faded. You don't like them anymore, and you shed them and you get something new. But you're still you this entire time. You're just changing your style.
Mm. All right. I want to go to some of the things that I saw you talk about with Rod with the other day. So let's start with, I think this will be a fun one, like banning Trump off Twitter. Let's recap that real quick. How do you feel about that?
Um, yeah, when I spoke to Rod about it, it had just happened,
Mm,
and I had just been thinking about it, and it's it's a mess. It's kind of complicated because um, I really don't know, but it depends. So on one level, like I said to Rod, on one level, Twitter is a private company and they can boot whoever they want off, and that's just it, right? Like it basically ends there, right? But it does get a little bit more complicated because they didn't boot him off before, and the reason they didn't boot him off before is because he was president, and because they recognized that the people had a right to hear or read what he had to say on Twitter. That Twitter was being used as a platform of communication by the president and the public, right? And that was a medium of communication that was being used, and it wasn't just strictly a private company anymore.
mm.
It was operating as a public platform, as the a digital public square. It was operating that way.
So I guess a
And
clarification I make there real quick, and you could, if we disagree about this, we can go back and forth on it. Is that it's not that
yeah.
they thought people had a right to hear him speak; it's
Hmm.
that they thought it was within a public interest to hear him speak, and they allowed a
Okay.
more deference. Like,
Sure.
hey, you're violating our TOS, but you're the president, so like we're gonna give
Right.
you a whole lot of slack here. And then he hung himself on it by
Yeah.
during an
And
insurrection tweeting positive things about insurrectionists, which is
right, exactly.
not a good
And
look.
and, and I hope it goes without saying that I don't condone literally any word that he
Foregone
tweeted.
assumption over here.
Yeah.
So
But the thing is that does complicate things, right? Because in so doing, Twitter and everyone else have acknowledged that Twitter is operating as something more than just, a social media platform, something fun that people do.
mm,
It's you are now communicating with the leader of the free world, and it is in a public interest for that communication to remain open despite him violating their terms of service flagrantly, right? So that means that there's an extra consideration here because everyone is recognizing this other element, right? That we're just kind of leaving it fuzzy, and we're just letting it be. And a lot of this is, Trump's doing, because nobody's ever had to worry about the president of the United States tweeting insane shit that might get people killed, right?
Mm-hmm.
Until this moment, and now suddenly we have to deal with this problem. So it's a new thing that everyone's just kind of not sure how to go about. Um, but the point is that, once the insurrection thing happened, and then definitely after he was president, they just decided he's out, and they have every right to do that as a public company, just speaking of it strictly in that way.
Well, I'd say even like irrespective of like its rights, do you think it was a good thing that it happened? Like even ignoring that.
Yeah, that's the thing that I'm not totally sure about, because you know I just worry what the consequences might be. I don't know what they would be.
Sure.
I'm kind of doing the thing that I mentioned before. Like, I'm just kind of thinking, okay, well, what could go wrong here? Like, we all think this is a great idea. This feels great. We're all glad to just not have to deal with his bullshit. But is this opening the door to another problem, and we're not seeing it because we're too busy having a parade about it, right? So that's just the way my brain works, and I'm not sure about the answer.
So let me try and give you like my argument in favor of banning him from Twitter long before that.
Sure.
So, and then you can feel free to criticize this position or like poke me on it. So I guess I preface by saying, like, we don't want to fall into like a nirvana fallacy, right? If there's so much harm coming from Trump being on Twitter, spreading misinformation, acting as a node of misinformation spread, a major node, probably the biggest. If that's a bad problem, I can't be overly concerned about hypothetical problems down the line that I don't get rid of this one thing that's in front of me. Like, I'm trying to think of an analogy, like I'm bleeding out, like, I don't know, I got like stabbed, I'm bleeding out. I'm like, well, what if I go to the hospital and I get a staph infection because hospitals are dirty, right? Like, there's a bigger problem here that needs to be solved. And then, like, if a staph infection comes, it comes. But, like, that's a much smaller problem than bleeding to death due to a knife wound, That's probably the nirvana fallacy thing I try and apply there. So I tend to study, like, a fair amount of, like, I do a lot of reading on, like, misinformation, like, propaganda, and, like, radicalization. Misinformation seems to play a very big role in that, and the way we model misinformation spread, or I should say the way the research I've read models misinformation is as like a complex contagion, basically like a viral disease similar to COVID-19. If you have someone who's like a major spreader of that disease, and you can force them to isolate, you make it so they're spreading less of that disease. And in Trump's case, his Twitter feed was an enormous source of misinformation on COVID-19, on election fraud. And then obviously, like, if you look at January 6th in a vacuum, you're like, oh, like, he made things worse. But it's like, not only did he make things worse on that day, but he literally spread the entire bedrock of the misinformation and used Twitter as a main platform for that. Yeah. Leading up to that, like, we have, I think it's over 50% of Republicans believe the election was stolen from him. There's no evidence for this position. So, like, at what point do you get to call misinformation and say, like, this is a danger in and of itself, because this misinformation spreads into people's media echo chambers and radicalizes them to have ideas that are dangerous, whether it's, I don't need to wear a mask, I can go on public, the pandemic's fake, hydroxychloroquine's a cure, or, sorry, I'm not trying to, like, overburden you, so give me some pushback on that.
No, I mean, what you're saying makes sense. I get the analogy for sure. But it's just that it's more complicated than just that, right? Like, kicking him off Twitter is a pretty significant blow, because Twitter is so huge and it's such a major platform, and it's where so many people are. But I'm assuming, you wouldn't necessarily want to, you wouldn't want it, but like, if Trump decided to open up his own social media platform, right? We can't really do anything about that, right? And now he has his own private platform, and let's say, just like Twitter can boot off whoever they want, he can boot off whoever he wants. And we can't have anybody in there who disagrees with him. If he finds out it's you could try to be anonymous or whatever. I'm speculating here, but, like, we can't really stop him from doing that, right? We can't stop him from starting his own newspaper and printing his own bullshit.
So I guess I'd make two points there. One, I think we should have probably some sort of, like, loose mechanism to be able to police sources of, like, huge misinformation. I do think there should be some apparatus to deal with that in like a very transparent way, and when it's incredibly egregious. But secondly, the bigger point is like if we had like everyone who had COVID-19 or like a cluster of people who had like COVID-19 who all wanted to go into a warehouse together and just rave for the rest of their lives, like
Right.
okay, as long as you're not near the people that don't have COVID. So, for
Right, but that's
example,
the problem.
mhm,
That's the problem, though, is that you can't stop that, right? You can't keep the people who have been in that warehouse from going to work and from getting on the subway. You can't do anything about that. So you're still going to get the infection, and yeah, maybe you've isolated it. I can see the utility of it, and again,
mhm.
Twitter can do whatever they want. That's the way it is. But I think that I generally think that it's better to hit the problem head on and just keep hitting it instead of trying to silence it or make it go
Well,
away
how do you
and
hit
push
the
it away.
problem?
I mean, the only way is to engage with people who disagree with you. And I know that that is sometimes completely impossible and a lot of times extremely difficult, right? Like the success rate for something like that is probably extremely low, right?
Mhm.
But I don't think it's a good idea to have some kind of apparatus like you're pointing out,
So, uh, j-
because
so my metaphor was a little sloppy, and
yeah,
just to clarify it. So my issue with like people like that being on Twitter is that it creates a vacuum, and you have normies who are just like there, like engaging with random, like their favorite musicians, or chatting about anime or whatever the fuck. I'm actually, I'll do like a shitty history version of this, I guess. There's gonna be some inaccuracies here. Caveat being there. So there's like this weird like GamerGate movement where basically, um, a lot of people who like were critical of like this weird niche games journalism thing that didn't really fuck them out. It turns out it was pretty much made up. But the point of it was to animate gamers and get them into basically reactionary like right wing movements. And so you have people who are watching like video game content who all of a sudden are getting recommended like this weird reactionary content talking about how the PC culture is trying to like make X-Men gay or something, or make X-Men PC, ignoring that like the whole X-Men comic franchise is about like racial discrimination and like segregation. Like that's why that's where the comic came up in like the 1960s or whatever. I'm not a comic book nerd, but I knew that little fun fact about it. Um, and just think, oh, they're trying to like PCify this, or they're trying to, oh, the representation for the female Ghostbusters is just ruining the Ghostbusters, that thing you love, right? It's going into this nostalgia and then using it to channel reactionary energy into people. But you have people who just want to watch videos about video games, but then like come into this content, they watch more of it because it kind of angers them. They're like, oh, they're taking something from me I love, and they get brought down this route. So when you have people like Donald Trump who are on Twitter, you're giving them access to that normie audience, while a site like Gab, you don't get access to a normie audience on a site like Gab. For those unaware, it's like basically Nazi Twitter.
right.
Oh, you got banned off Twitter, well, go on Gab, and then they're just literally just shit talking the Jews and saying every racist thing you can imagine, and it's a horrible cesspool.
Yeah,
Um,
and that doesn't sound like a fun night for me.
mm.
I don't give a shit about any of that stuff. Like I don't want to participate in any of it. It's insane to me. But whatever, go do your idiotic shit. Um, I just don't. I think that the vacuum becomes more dangerous when no one is paying attention to it except for the people in the vacuum, right? And
Well, the
so,
point is you'd have to go to like gab.com instead of twitter.com. The reason why people are on a site like Twitter is because it's meant to be widely accessible. The reason they ban Nazis is because people don't want to, no people don't want to be near Nazis. They're
right,
very weird. Like, I don't know if you ever talked to any, but they're very fucking weird. They're very
sure,
strange. They're very aggressive, and they're like
yeah,
completely
they
nuts. It's a
believe,
very wild conversation to have,
yeah,
like
they
every
believe
time.
they believe insane things. But I mean,
But like this,
that's it. That's
but
just that's just the thing that I'm worried about. The thing that I'm worried about is Trump was on Twitter and like I saw Trump's tweets even though I didn't follow him because everybody is looking at what he's saying because he's the president or he was and um, there's even though it was there's tons of outrage and there's tons of performative outrage and there's tons of over overreaction and stuff like that as well as the regular reaction and just seeing what he says and saying whatever you got to say about it. um, but in a lot of ways I think that's healthier than him just going away and then me forgetting that he even exists and he's just in some creepy corner of the internet doing some insane shit and then one day something explodes. That's I'm
well,
not saying that that's gonna happen. I'm just saying that that's something I can see. There could be some kind of out of sight out of mind thing. And again, I'm not arguing that Twitter has to reinstate him or anything like that. They can do whatever they want. But there is that kind of small complication of Twitter functioning as the public square,
Hmm.
but kind of not. So they're kind of having,
There's one thing I want to clarify. I
yeah,
don't want to. So you said out of sight, out of mind. That's not actually what I'm saying. What I'm saying
yeah,
is we need to contain the disease. I'm not going to pretend the 13% of the population in a warehouse doesn't have COVID, right? I'm just saying, okay, but now it's not 50% of the population. So hypothetically, like Trump's
yeah,
election misinformation, if he was like banned off of Twitter like
yeah.
November 3rd, then like him not being there spreading election misinformation, maybe instead of having 50+% of Republicans who believe the election was stolen, maybe we'd have 10 or 15%.
Mhm. Yeah,
A much more
maybe.
manageable percentage of crazy people, and those crazy people might be just as insane. That might be the same 10% of people who showed up at the MAGA rally on January 6th. That might be the same group of people who are going to go out and do a mass shooting. Okay, like these could all be
Yeah,
the
I
same
mean,
group of people, but the point is like you're not going to have as many people who are just so like existing outside of reality.
yeah, I mean, I think there might be a kind of availability bias going on. Like we know about that because we're also on Twitter and we see it.
Mm-hmm.
But those people are on Twitter following Donald Trump because Donald Trump's on Twitter. And if he
Mm-hmm.
goes somewhere else, they're going to follow him somewhere else. And the people who would be inclined to follow him somewhere else would go anyway. Like I don't think it
Well,
necessarily
I don't
stops
think that's.
anything.
I
I
don't.
think
I don't
I
know if that's
think
true, right? It's like if you said
I
if you
don't
put a regulator on a car, people aren't going to go over 100 miles per hour because you can remove the regulator, right? Well, no, it requires
yeah, but
effort to remove a
well,
regulator, you know? Or
yeah, but I mean it doesn't work as cleanly as something like a regulator on a car. You know,
mm,
you're just kind of like I forget what you call them, but like you're just changing the course of the river by shoving some stone in there, but you're not stopping the river. The river's just going in another direction. It's still going to get to the ocean, one way or the other.
well, but
It
if
might
but
flood.
if
It
less
might flood
water is
another.
going there, you know, like
Well,
that's I
less
guess that's sort of my point. Like
less
you're
no,
going to
but
see less people who are being infected. Like so,
but
there's
that's
already
the thing is
studies
you're
on this
not
though.
when you reroute the river. It's all the same water. It's just you shifted its course. It's going in another direction. It might flood a new area,
There might be an issue with the river metaphor then because
and but that's what it seems like to me. It
mm,
seems like all you're really doing is diverting it so it doesn't bother you in your spot, but you're gonna send it somewhere else, and it's all the same water. The water didn't you didn't just disappear half the water. It's
mm,
still the same water. It's just being rerouted, and that's what I worry about, because there's also this thing of you know, a big thing about conspiracy thinking is, the hidden truth. Like, I have found the hidden truth.
yeah.
They don't want me to know, right? And I mean, the easiest way to turn that stuff into that is to ban it from certain platforms and shut it out from conversation. I would rather, like I told Rod, I would rather, have people share stupid information and then argue with them about it than for platforms to be like, I'm deleting this can't be on our platform because it's misinformation, and they go, well, I don't trust you, and
Mm.
then they're going to find it somehow. It's the internet. There's no escaping anything, right?
So,
But
uh,
what's worse
well,
about that is that now you have to contend with the fact that it was buried, and they now think, oh, the reason you buried it is because it's the real truth you didn't want me to know. So now
so
you have to get through that level of it before you even get to the point where you're just arguing about the thing itself.
what I want to I want to inject some like facts. So like there's a lot of our values are here too, but we do have to interact with like the empiricism on the topic. So for example, after Trump's ban from Twitter, there was a 70% drop in misinformation. Is that solely due to Trump? Could it be because some other conspiracists were
On Twitter.
no, just in general? I think I can pull up the specific study. It's like a Vox article citing some study or whatever that I read the other day.
So like
Um,
internet wide, there's just less misinformation.
Well, he didn't just get banned off of Twitter. He got banned off of like every
Yeah.
like main platform. And like, what's funny is he still was like trying to. First, he started tweeting from the POTUS account, and they just like disabled that like immediately, which was like, come on, dude, like you're such a baby. And then he started like basically essentially putting out tweets through the press, the White House, what's it called, the press correspondence office. So you could like go on a website and like see Donald Trump's statements here, but it's like I know that because I follow this stuff closely, but you can tell me every one of his Twitter followers like went to the White House like press briefing page and saw his like all caps like things he made them like publish on there. Like
Yeah.
it just didn't reach as many people like
Right.
by any stretch of the imagination.
It's
Um,
interesting. But I mean, the other thing about that though, one of the confounding variables maybe is, you know, by the time that happened, it was over. The presidency was over. He was out. You know, it's I don't know. I mean, you know, there's too many variables to speak with any kind of certainty about it. But you know, getting back to the free speech issue,
Mhm.
generally speaking, I would rather contend with someone's idiotic speech than to try to silence it
So
or keep them from speaking. I would rather them say whatever stupid thing they want to say. And, you know, like people talk about, you know, platforming KKK members, right?
mhm.
Like you're going to have a KKK guy come to your school and, you know, talk like and have a debate with one of your professors. Yeah, I would debate a KKK guy and I would fucking obliterate that guy because I'm certain that what he believes is insane and I can show it, right? So I'm not worried about, you know, this thing of like, yeah, but he's going to be speaking his poisonous nonsense and then someone in the audience is going to be programmed and turn into a KKK member. Like that, I don't think that that's how it works. I think if someone in the audience heard a KKK guy speak and was convinced, they were already on the fence at the very least. They were leaning in that direction at least, right?
Mhm.
But they would also have to contend with me being on stage arguing against every stupid thing this person is saying, every insane thing they're saying. But when we, you know, deplatform them and we refuse to engage and we refuse to just crush their ridiculous arguments with, you know, our the obvious superior arguments, what
Well,
happens is
that's
these
your problem. It's
people,
not obvious though,
well, to me they're obvious, right? And I
and
can make
therein
them
lies the
obvious.
problem.
Yeah, but I can make them obvious to you unless you're already inclined to disagree and go with them in the first place, in which case there was nothing I could have done for
All
you
right,
anyway.
here's where I need to crush the marketplace of ideas. All right, and you feel free to.
Yeah,
So I've done like
well, actually, hold on.
sure. Sorry, yeah, go ahead.
let me just finish that point. So the thing is that even if I lose, let's say, even if I'm bad at arguing and this KKK guy makes me look like an idiot, right? The 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 situation where I am challenging his ideas is better than for me to shut him down, not allow him to speak, and send him off to some crazy corner. And then next thing you know, there's, you know, some hotel conference room where he's speaking unchallenged and there's no debate and he just gets the floor completely. And everyone who shows up to that has no perspective and they're already leaning in that direction already because they, you know, they went there. So it's just better to try to introduce some conflict to it, right? And
Mhm.
I firmly believe that bad ideas are, if they cannot, what's the thing,
The light is
uh,
the best disinfectant for whatever.
sort of, but it's more clearly than that is just bad ideas can't survive the company of better ideas for long. They just can't.
And
And
if that were true, I would agree with you.
well,
Unfortunately, I don't think it's true. um,
well, there are a lot of factors going into that sort of stuff. It's not purely just people debating ideas, right? It's
mhm.
people debating their identities. It's people having group membership. It's people, you know, who are compensating for a wound. They're compensating for an insecurity. There's all these things going on, right? So it's not simply a battle of ideas, but that is part of it. And you definitely don't do anybody any good when you just try to silence things because there's no such thing. People are going to find it and it's going to have more allure and it's going to have more power because it seems like this secret knowledge that I've discovered that they
Mhm.
don't want me to know because they're trying to control me and I don't trust the system and all that bullshit,
There's
you know?
okay. There's let's see. All right. So first, I think it would be good if you went to a KKK conference and you argued in front of an audience of KKKers with like the you know
Right.
Grand Wizard of the KKK. Now that I think would be beneficial, but I don't think it's worth dragging the leader of the KKK or whatever onto CNN and having a debate with him in front of a larger audience. I think that
Oh,
is where it would be toxic.
I totally disagree, man. Uh,
Well,
you should
what? So,
watch.
hold on. Hold on. You talk for a while. Like there's
Okay,
a lot of
sorry.
things I have to clarify here.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Um, so there's this cool book called Industrial Strength Denial. Now, I think what a lot of people who like subscribe to like the marketplace of ideas don't sort of get is that time is a finite resource. The more time you spend talking about bullshit, the more time you're not spending talking about actually important things that can move society forward. And
Okay.
the tobacco industry or the oil industries are great examples of this. They knew that CO2 pollutes the climate. They knew cigarettes cause cancer. their whole business operation for a long period of time and still ongoing is to downplay those effects, to create like, oh, well, what if it's not? And the goal isn't to convince most people that you're correct. It's only to convince enough and make it look aesthetically like there's an argument. Well, the overwhelming plurality of scientists will agree on both of these conclusions. Man-made climate change is real. It's going to kill us. Cigarettes cause cancer. They'll agree about these things. But the goal of them is not to engage in like something you can fact check. It's to create the aesthetic of plausible deniability. It's a narrative tool that they're doing. And the more time you spend, arguing with like, are black people people? Should we rape women? Right? Like these are conversations I don't need to have. We crossed this bridge 100 fucking years ago. I don't need to keep doing this. Yeah. And the more time, the more space we give them to breathe, the more we're like, oh, well, is there legitimacy to their point? So I think there are avenues where you can challenge them, but it's not to like a mainstream audience where you platform them. And I guess I'll expand on like sort of how propaganda works because.
Well, can I respond to that?
Yeah, sure.
So the first thing I was going to say before was you should watch Christopher Hitchens sometime in maybe the 80s, maybe the 90s, somewhere back then. He guest hosted a talk show, like a late night kind of TV show, and he had the Grand Wizard of the KKK call in, right? And dude, he did more work against the KKK in those 20 minutes. You could watch it on YouTube. I think it's about 20 minutes. He doesn't let them slide by on anything. He's amazing. I mean, Christopher Hitchens is Christopher Hitchens, right? He's like at another level of discourse. But what I mean is that there's a way to do it where you can absolutely deconstruct and destroy this stuff. Right?
So,
and to your other point about time as a finite resource, I completely agree, and I completely agree that the more time we spend going over and over bullshit, all that time is better spent doing actually important, good things. The problem is, so long as people believe that bullshit, it needs to be addressed. So you can't escape it just by not discussing it, right? So we can think it's a foregone conclusion. Obviously, yeah, the KKK is wrong. These people are idiots, right? But they exist, they believe what they believe, and beliefs lead to behavior, and that matters, right? So it's kind of like saying there's a kid in class who didn't pay attention last year and they're really behind on their math, and you go, well, look, you should know this already. We're just going to keep going. That kid is still in class, and that kid is still going to be behind, and it might be labor intensive. You might find it completely mind numbing and boring. I do. Talking about nonsense like that is completely just it's excruciating to me. But I recognize that I have to take care of this kid. This kid's got to come with us because there's no other way. We can't just throw him out the window, right? We can't make him disappear. The kid's going to always be there, and the longer we leave him there, the worse it's going to get. So even though I agree with you that these things are beyond foregone conclusions, right? They don't. And we need to make them agree because that's the only way we're going to move forward. So it's actually a bigger time suck to try to shut them out and shut them up because they're not going to go away. And later you're just going to have to deal with an even more complicated, compounded problem.
Well, so to expand on, okay. So the Hitchens thing, like the reason why Hitchens is so good is because like he understands like the optics, or he understood, I guess, he's dead. The optics of a given situation. Like that's why Hitchens is good, not because he's right. Like there's plenty of people who are more right than Hitchens, but it's because like he's eloquent and he just slays people rhetorically. Like that's sort of the point though. It's not that he's right, it's that he can make an audience realize he's right and how dumb his opponent is. It's pure optics, or not. Sorry, like there's substance there, but like it's not the substance you're attracted to, right? You can go listen to any sort of number of PhDs talk about that topic. With Hitchens, it's because he's so rhetorically effective that he's like brilliant. You can watch Hitchens and learn how to annihilate people while being correct. He's excellent at that.
Yeah, it's a masterclass for sure.
But that's what you're learning. You're learning rhetoric. You're not learning to like be correct necessarily. You're learning to balance like how to use effective rhetoric while being correct.
Well, maybe, but I mean, in this case, right, specifically, it's just, I don't care. Put David Duke on CNN. He's, you know, if the other person is doing their job, this guy stands no chance because his beliefs are insane. His ideas are idiotic. They make no sense. You can deconstruct them, you know? So I believe very firmly in that, you know, an intelligent person can show better ideas to be better than bad ideas. And, you know, someone like Hitchens is obviously a stellar example of that.
Mm.
But I think, you know, you don't have to be a superhero. You just have to be smart, and it can be done. And even if you're not a superhero, even if you're just like peasant level discourse, right? Let's just say like you're just at the bottom of the bottom and you're not good at it. That's still better than trying to, you know, sweep it under the rug. It's just not going to work. It's going to stay under the rug. It's going to pile up. It's going to fester. It's going to get worse. We need to address these things as long as people believe them. As long as people believe nonsense, we have to continue to say, no, this is nonsense. You know, here's why. The earth is not flat. Here's why. We have to just keep doing it because we're all in the same boat and everybody's got to be okay with the direction we're going. Otherwise, the boat might sink. We're all fucked. So that's the way that I see it. I see it as, you know, these people are lagging behind. We have to help them. And they believe nonsense. We have to explain to them why they're nonsense. But we did it 100 years ago. We did it 50 years ago. We did it 20 years ago. Yeah, I know. It's annoying. We have to do it.
Well,
You know,
like so some of the ways we did that, right? So like people having negative attitudes towards like black people or whatever. That's probably a light way to describe that, but probably a little cavalier. But
they had slightly unfavorable attitudes towards yeah.
Yeah, but like one of the ways we did that is by just regulating behavior and like what people could do, right? By forcing people to serve black customers or allow them in black businesses or integrate them. By forcing this exposure, you you created an environment that like led to this, well, I'd say change, I guess, in the type of racism like we experience. I sort of lost the plot in the point I was making there. My bad.
I think I see where you're going.
um,
But what I would say is, you know, yeah, once you get to the point where you're enforcing things like with the cops, you know, the cops are
mhm.
going to the segregated schools to make sure there's no riot because they're enforcing this idea. I mean, that idea came from somewhere and it's being enforced because it was established beforehand as an idea.
Mhm.
And the only way that happened is through people communicating and deciding this is the way to go, this is what we want,
Well,
right?
so at a certain point, that debate ended, right? And like they passed civil rights legislation, so there were still tons of
Right.
people who didn't feel their voices were heard, who still believed that black people
Yeah.
and white people shouldn't be in schools together. And we said,
Yeah.
well, fuck you, we don't care. We're going to have school integration. We're going to literally send the military to force this integration. And then over time, their argument collapsed because it was ridiculous. But they were trying to create this argument, and like probably it was really just like, you know,
Well,
the
yeah, but that's just it. The argument collapsed.
well,
Um,
but it didn't collapse just because we kept arguing them. It collapsed because we forced integration, ignored their
well,
argument.
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, you know, I'm not an expert on that, but it seems to me that yeah, like, you know, there are certain things, for example, like we're going to stop someone from committing what we consider a crime, right? So we're
Mhm.
just going to stop them. We're not going to try to convince them not to commit the crime. We're just going to stop them from doing it, right? But we're going to say, listen, you can't do that, okay? This is why you can't do that. That's kind of the way that I'm looking at it, is in that sort of way where, you know, we go, listen, the vast majority of us now have decided that it's immoral what was being done here, and we're going to have to enforce this. You are now in the minority. And we can enforce that in that way, but you're not convincing anybody. You might actually be fostering resentment in those people who still disagree with you, right? Doesn't mean you don't do it. You still have to do it because it's the moral thing to do. But the way you get to those people isn't by just forcing them. You have to talk to them. You have to figure out some way to make them see and understand what your point of view is and why
Well,
it's
you
more
can do
correct.
both though. So I would
Yeah.
say like I want to reach out to people who are wrong, who are misinformed, find good ways to reach them.
Yeah.
Like I'm pretty far left leaning, and like I fucking rage at people on the left who just like dismiss Trump's words, say we just need to scream with them being racist. I'm like, no, you need to like use effective rhetoric, meet them where they are, and convince them over to your side. It's possible, but like it involves you like changing like what you're talking about, like avoiding all culture war issues. Um,
It's compassion. You have to recognize where they're coming from.
Yeah. Um, but like I think you could say two things, right? Like one, I will try and take your concerns seriously, and I will try and address them with whoever I care about to whatever extent I can.
Right.
But at the same time, like just because you have those concerns does not mean that I won't like do things besides that. For example, like I might
Yeah.
talk to someone about like election misinformation and why they're wrong, and like maybe the people who still believe that, like okay, they're gonna be mad that like we're just banning Trump off Twitter and we're like banning discussion about how like COVID-19 is a Chinese laboratory hoax that's both real and not real depending on who the fuck you're talking to. Like they might get mad about that and they might put that as part of their conspiracy, and it's like all right, but like as long as less people are not believing this as a result of that, I'm dealing with one like super crazy person instead of like 10 like moderately crazy people, like
Mm.
it's a win in my book.
Okay.
And like that's like the utilitarian calculus I sort of have to make here. Like, do I want more people to be like pretty crazy and like have one person who's or have like one person who's super crazy? And it's like,
Yeah.
I'll take the one super crazy.
I mean, it's that, but that's the thing is it depends on how you go about doing that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the I think the pandemic video is the thing that I mentioned when I was talking to Rod, right? That thing was going around, and YouTube was banning it and all this stuff. People were still finding a way to see it. People were looking for it after a
Mm-hmm.
certain point. It's like, oh, there's this video they don't want me to see. They started looking for it. But now I can't see that person because they're off in some weird corner of the internet and I can't see what they're seeing. And then I can't be that person, you know, talking back to the KKK guy. I can't be the person saying, well, hold on a second. This doesn't make any sense. Look
Mm-hmm.
at this and look at this, right? I think that it's a better approach, even though your your success rate may not significantly improve. I think it's just overall a better approach to say, look, okay, I watched that video too. I see why you think this thing about this, but have you considered this, right? You have to acknowledge what they saw. You have to acknowledge why it's resonating with them for whatever fucking reason.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can approach a way to make them think their way out of it, right? So like I had a friend who was like a 9/11 truther, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he post all this stuff on Facebook, and I would just get into it with him, right? I would just say, okay, look, you just posted this. Here are the things that I see that are wrong with this, right? And we would just go back and forth, and it would be these long, novels of a Facebook conversation, right?
And you never changed his mind, right?
And no, I mean, I chipped away at it slowly,
Hmm.
right? And it wasn't just me, but over time, he started to see, okay, I'm seeing what I'm doing here. Like I'm seeing this error. You pointed it out. And part of the reason why he was willing to do that is because we knew each other and we respected each other. And he knew that I didn't think he was an imbecile. He knew that I didn't look down on him. He knew that I saw him as a person and that we were just engaging with this information and that I was lovingly providing him with my perspective. Right? That's the way that he received it. And that is so much more effective, right? Now, you can't just be friends with everybody and it can't be the exact same thing when you approach other people, right? But
Yeah, particularly when you're just random assholes on Twitter or whatever.
yeah, but you can try to approach it in a similar kind of way, right? So, there's the steel manning thing where you make sure that, right, steel manning basically is the opposite of straw man. A straw man is, you caricature their argument because it's easier to tear down, and so you make up some idiotic version of what they're saying, and then you argue against that because it's easier, right? The steel man is what you should do, which is take the strongest possible version of what they're saying and respond to that. So basically repeat their argument in a way that they would say, yeah, that's exactly what I think, right? Because then you're on the same page. And it does two things. First of all, you know that you're understanding what they're saying 100% because they just confirmed, right? And they know that you're not trying to just, finagle your way around their argument and try to make them look stupid. You're actually listening, you're paying attention, and you're understanding them, right? That
Mm.
makes them immediately more open to listening to what you have to say. And there's another level to that, which I just wrote a piece about it. It'll be out in a couple of days for Center for Inquiry.
Mm.
But I want to add a level to that called star manning, right? And the star man thing is, why do they believe this, right? the way that Steelman is, you engage with the best possible version of the argument. To Starman is you add to that the best possible version of the person. So you say, okay, look, you think 9/11 was an inside job, right? And you think that because of the buildings, building 7, and you think like the temperature of the metal and all that crazy stuff, right? And you explain it to them, and they go, yeah, that's exactly what it is. And you go, okay. And the reason you care about this is because you care about the truth, you care about what really happened, you care about the government lying to you, and you think that's bad, and you want to uncover it, right? So now I've connected with them as a person. I've connected with we have a mutual desire for truth. We want to uncover the truth. We want to find out what's real, and we care very much about dishonesty. We care very much about, uncovering this thing, right? So now we're on the same page. Now we're the same person. Now we're buddies, And I don't mean that we should do this cynically. Like, we shouldn't be doing this in a dishonest way. We should try to find the real connection. From there, you can be in a few minutes just like I was with my friend on Facebook that we've known each other for 10 years. Because now this person knows, okay, this person's hearing me, this person's understanding me. Let me hear what they have to say. You're so much more likely to get that response than if you just, try to shut them out, try to shut them up, try to get rid of them, try to, call them an idiot, make fun of them, all that stuff, right? Which is an understandable response when you hear crazy shit. But if your desire is to persuade, you have to recognize that's a human being, and they believe what they believe for reasons. And you need to understand those reasons before you can even get to them. So I know I've been going on, sorry.
I think that's a really interesting idea. I like what you're saying about star manning, because I think that goes into something I want to sort of talk about and explain a little bit. Where well, why do people believe this? And I think there's a subconscious, you're talking about understanding what their stated reasons are. Yeah. And their beliefs. But I think a lot of people operate on these unconscious sort of scripts, I guess, that they internalize that. So when something's like intuitively makes sense, like my dumb thing about the women having finite eggs that I didn't realize. I'm like, oh, that's counterintuitive. It doesn't sound right. Shouldn't they just be producing a new? And no, I'm just wrong. I'm an idiot apparently. It's this weird thing where when things seem counterintuitive to them, that can't be true. There has to be some other explanation. But it's how does something become intuitive? And I think that process has to do with enculturation and priming, right? So for example, let's look at election misinformation. Well, why do people think the election was stolen? Well, why did they? Okay. Did they just not trust the processes? Well, why didn't they trust the processes? Well, it turns out Trump and the Republicans overall have tried to question elections for the longest period of time. Trump is just a very extreme version of calling elections invalid, saying there's all these fake mail-in votes, in spite of there being no evidence of this. So in the prelude to the election, right? He attacked mail-in voting. He said oh, they're going to steal the election through mail-in voting. We're going to win the day of, and then they're going to steal it through there are logical reasons for all of this. But the people who it made sense to were the people who this had been said to repeatedly. So there's this a textbook I was reading that explained it was 4 ways that people understand truth, and one of the important points is that one thing is through I'm conflating 2 things right now, but basically when you hear something familiar, it sounds right. So the way you can manufacture truth to somebody is by repeating the same thing over and over again, right? I've had to talk to so many people about immigrants having my master's degree is in criminal justice, about immigrants having lower rates of crime. And it's what? You think they have low rates of crime? I'm not delusional. I'm right. You think so because you hear on through your media ecosystems repeatedly how immigrants are criminals, immigrants are criminals, immigrants are criminals, and they repeat it so much that well, that feels familiar, that feels correct, that feels intuitive, for a variety of reasons, and then as a result, you're going to consume media that has that confirmation bias that feeds into this, right? You're going to everything that paints immigrants poorly. Yes, things that show immigrants positively, you forget about that pretty quickly, right? It just leads to this feedback loop of reinforcing these narratives. So with the election fraud thing, I feel like it functioned in a similar way. Well, why do they think this? Okay, well, they said oh, I think that the election was stolen because look at these like weird drop boxes in this county, or these boxes they found underneath the suitcases they found under, like, if you're debunking the individual facts, to me, I don't think you're actually doing anything. Like, I think fact checking is just like it's like a liberal delusion, where we want, like, I want to believe that fact checking works, but I think fact checking fundamentally misunderstands what propaganda like that is doing. It primes people to fuck. I want to flesh these out. I was gonna write like a couple articles and make companion videos about this, but I'll do my best version of it right now. First, like, you're priming them for what they're going to see, and then when it happens, you go, see, I told you that was going to happen. Whether or not that's the exact thing you told them was going to happen or not, you say that, and then they're like, oh yeah, I see it, and then they just become like sort of invested in it. And it's a narrative tool. You're teaching them what they're going to see. You're like setting something up, and then you're delivering on the thing you said was going to happen. It doesn't matter what actually happened or what was true. The fact is, you created like this paranoia, and then told them, look, the election was stolen from us. Like, well, it was only stolen from you because more people voted for the other guy. That's not stealing. That's just democracy. But to them, the problem I think is that, like, the only valid outcome for them, like, oh, the election's invalid. Well, why is it invalid? I think subconsciously it's because there's a certain thing that's what's it called, illegitimate to a certain coalition of like conservatives, and it's when liberals are in power. That's the underlying script that they're operating from, and then from that, whether or not they realize it or not, I think that's like an ingrained, like, some it's conscious, but many I think it's unconscious, that like there's an illegitimacy to Democrats having power or liberals having power. And from that, you then see these other things emerge of like, oh, like they just get illegal voters or they get all this. But those are all standard like things they assume are true because they believe that underlying like belief that's like very hard to like deal with. And I guess like what I was trying to get at there was how I think media creates these narratives that people like abide to through repetition, right? And that's my issue with like a lot of like conspiracy theories, of giving them like room to breathe. It's because I know that the way people learn something to be true, like a very huge driver, is familiarity, right? Like if you just heard like 10 times over like the last month that like Miley Cyrus has a kid, like, oh yeah, Miley Cyrus probably does have a kid. Like, I have no idea if Miley Cyrus has a kid, but like if I heard that 10 times in a month, I'd probably assume it was accurate. And it doesn't matter if it's accurate or not. It matters that like you have multiple people saying it from multiple angles, and you're like, oh, if everyone's saying it, it's got to be true. It's this heuristic where if everyone's saying it, like, well, there's got to be something true about it, or it's got to be true. Yeah. It's this weird way to like warp our brains, because like we're not innately logical creatures. We can learn to think rationally. We can learn to think through stuff, but we do have that lizard brain that operates off of impulse, that has an overreactive response to fear. So if you give us things that are like that conform to our preconceived values and like tell us that like, you know, if we don't do these things, like harm will become you, you will die, things you care about will die or get destroyed. Sorry, I'm kind of like a little all over the place here, I guess, but
no, I'm following. It's good. Yeah.
That like we're designed to have an overreaction to that, right? Our ancestors who saw like a stick and thought it was a snake were rewarded for responding to a stick as though it was a snake. Our ancestors who saw a snake and thought it was a stick, well, they weren't our ancestors for much longer, right? They died. So having that overreactive fear response is what propaganda sort of reacts on, right? It tries to get into your deep-seated like weird subconscious shit and get in on these fears that like drive you to act on like this survival instinct that fundamentally override. I think the term is it's affective override, basically, where like your brain, it's amygdala hijacking. It's one of those two terms, where like we get you so emotionally invested in one thing that your ability to critically analyze anything else or think about anything else just gets completely shut down. And I think that's like what we're seeing with stuff like conspiracy theories, is they don't function as a series of facts or a theory to be tested or independently ripped down. A conspiracy, the way it works, is it's a narrative tool that conforms to the pre-existing biases of those who agree with it. And by repeating their like weird talking points and their nonsense over and over again, they make more people say, oh yeah, you know, I actually heard that like the election was going to be stolen through mail-in voting, and then it was. Like, that's crazy that like we knew this whole time and they were still able to steal it, right? It's like, well, no, that's not what happened. But like you heard that was gonna happen, so now like you see, you're like, oh yeah, they said it and then it happened. And it's like most people, when you have this very casual understanding, end up going down that right. Sorry, end of monologue, end of rant.
No, it's good.
Just
You said a lot of stuff there. It makes sense, everything you're saying. I get it. I just think it's, well, like, you know, for example, fact checking. Yeah, we wish it worked, but of course, the minute somebody goes, well, how do I know your facts are the facts, right?
Yep.
And you know, in some ways that's a good instinct to have, because just because someone said, oh, I fact checked that, by the way, and this is what's actually going on, I'll be like, well, yeah, well, how do you know that, right? That's a good thing to encourage,
It's
right?
the grand
It,
lie, I think, is what this is called. Like where you just don't learn to trust anything. Like where you
yeah,
have this
well,
complete breakdown of information systems to where like you
that's the
can't trust
problem.
anything. So you need this strong man who's like,
Right.
raw intuition will guide you through stuff. There's a
Yeah,
term for
and
that. It's fascism.
yeah, and that's the danger, right? But part of the reason that fact checking doesn't work is because there's a presumption there that facts matter to people, and they don't really,
Huh. I
right?
wasn't expecting that.
So
I agree, actually. I just wasn't. I figured you'd be more in line with like the facts do matter. It's like I want them to.
no,
I agree. I do.
no, I mean, they
Yeah.
of course they matter.
Mm-hmm.
What reality matters, what's true matters, right? But
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't necessarily mean it matters to people.
Yeah.
And this is true of everyone across the spectrum, right? Because there are facts that one side swallows because it confirms their biases or their one of their desires, the way they want to see the world, and they ignore the rest. Everybody's doing the confirmation bias thing. Everybody
Oh
does it,
yeah. Yeah. For
right?
sure.
You have to work really, really hard to check yourself against that. And so, you know, so there are two layers to this conspiracy problem, right? The one thing is actually that it's deeper than what you were talking about. Everything you were saying is right, but it's even deeper than that, because the conspiracy theory thinking is satisfying some deep psychological emotional need,
Mm.
right? It's more than just, you know, like a in-group thing, and there's something where it's like, no, I need to be edified in
Like
some way.
access to that hidden knowledge you were talking about before.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like
I
there's
didn't mention it,
something.
but I do agree with that.
Yeah, there's something satisfying about that and gratifying, and it makes you feel like, oh, I'm special, I've got this thing, right?
Mm.
And that's satisfying something. There's some need there that is being satisfied by that, and we need to understand that in order to combat it properly.
I
And
just
so there are, full grown adults who are walking around believing the earth is flat, right?
mm.
And kind of getting to the intuitive knowledge thing that you mentioned. Intuitively, it makes sense to believe the earth is flat, right? Like it's kind of weird for your brain to think, no, I'm on a giant ball. That doesn't make any sense
Mm.
intuitively speaking, right? It feels flat. Like I can see straight ahead, it's flat, right? You have to think a little bit more to figure out why that doesn't make any sense. But um, there are these grown adults walking around with this stuff, right? We need to disabuse them of nonsense. That's an important thing to do, right? Because nonsense is bad, and the more nonsense gets out there, the more people believe nonsense, whatever. I just think the best way to do it is to approach it and engage it and figure out the best ways to do that. How you approach a grown adult who already has this stuff going on, you have to understand the psychology. You have to understand the mechanisms at play. You have to understand that their identity is so closely tied to these beliefs. They go to these conventions, they've got friends, they've got T-shirts, they've put tons of money into a side business where they sell flat Earth models, and you know what I mean. Like there's all this stuff
Well,
that
there's that community
they
element that gets them like
yeah,
ingrained into it.
just
Yeah.
like just like any religion or whatever, there's a
Mm.
whole community element, and it's like, if I stop believing this, I lose my entire family.
Yeah.
There's something to that too that needs to be taken into account. So it's not just, listen, here's why your ideas are wrong, I'm going to sit you down and explain to you the facts, and you're going to walk out of here a smarter guy. It doesn't work like that. You have to understand the emotional component. Humans are emotional
It's like if
beings.
I tell you like you can be right or you can be happy, what would you choose? And like I would choose
Right.
happy. I want to think there's a world where I could be happy and right, but like if you make me choose between, let's
Yeah.
say I can give you some secret knowledge that will give you the whole truth of the world, and like
Right.
you'll want to kill yourself. Would you want to know that? And the answer is no. You wouldn't. Like no one wants to know that. Why would I
Yeah,
want to know a truth that makes me want to kill myself? You know?
yeah,
And for
that's
that, accepting like the world is round can be that truth. That's just like, well, yeah, then I lose my friends, like Tim,
yeah,
Tom, and Jane. We all meet on Tuesdays, have
yeah.
coffee, watch
And
documentaries about how the Earth is fucking flat.
yeah, and you do hear about people who stumble upon something and they realize they were wrong, and they go through that whole process, and it's really hard. These are really brave people,
Mm.
or at least resilient people. They have to tolerate a lot. They lose their entire community. There was I forgot what it's called now, but there was a documentary that I saw on Netflix about the Hasidic Jewish community in Brooklyn, and there were
Mm.
a few people who they apostatized, and it's really hard. It's really, really rough for them.
Are you in New York?
They're losing everything. Yeah, I'm in Queens.
Okay, I'm from Rockland, New York,
Oh, cool.
which is like, I
Yeah,
don't know, like 45 minutes from here or something.
yeah, yeah. I've
I'm
been
in
there.
I'm in Florida now, but
Ah,
um,
but yeah. So you have to take into account all of those things that are at play because all those dynamics matter. All
yeah.
those things matter. You know, you're not just going to pull somebody out with a book. That's not how it works for the vast majority of people, right?
Mm,
But the other thing is that we have to be mindful of, and it's something that we can systematize. It's just hard. Is instilling in people certain values and certain um, techniques from the beginning, right? So
mm,
like part of your education should be asking questions, critical thinking. You know,
mm,
I had critical thinking when I was in school, but it wasn't really critical thinking, right? I didn't learn this stuff in school, but it could have been. It could have been in school. You know, I could have been instructed in, you know, you could take like philosophy classes early on, and instead of it being an elective where, you know, only the people inclined to do it get it. You learn to we can make it a value to seek out information that we disagree with. We can make it a value to talk to people who believe different things than us and to try to understand each other,
mm.
right? Instead of it turning into this thing where, you know, oh, they believe this and they're evil, which is kind of the mentality that everybody walks around with. You know, I did, everyone. Like it's, oh yeah, you're one of those. You're not like me. You're an unperson.
Yeah.
But we can do better than that. We can instill a value in discovering that you're wrong. You know, like we talked about earlier. For me, being wrong is like it's it's simultaneously exhilarating and a relief, right? So it's exhilarating because I'm like, oh wow, I didn't understand this. So now I get to dig in and find out this thing. Let me figure out what happened, right? What did I get wrong? Where's all this new information? Right? But the relief thing is, oh my God, thank God I'm not wrong about that anymore because I could
Mm.
have done some damage.
Imagine how often I would have looked stupid. Oh, I'm trying to remember someone.
Even that, yeah. But like, like for me, it's like, oh, thank God, like, you know, because hopefully I didn't already do some damage. But if I had still believed that, maybe I would have said something or done something based on that, and maybe that would have hurt somebody or something. You know what I mean? That's
Mhm.
the way my brain goes. But we can make it so that people are rewarded for being honest about that, right? we
Mm.
can we can foster a culture where, you know, I try to do it on Twitter, for example. Like on Twitter I just saw Nicole Hannah Jones and Jesse Single going back and forth about, you know, all the stupid shit that's going on about the New York Times right now, and they misunderstood each other, right? One of them misunderstood the other, and they were going back and forth, and they realized the error. And Nicole Hannah Jones said, "Oh, I misunderstood. I thought you were talking about this, but you're
Mm.
actually talking about this. I'm sorry about that." Right? And I saw that and I retweeted it and I said, "This is great. Kudos to both of them. We need more of this. We need to do this more and we need to encourage it when we see it." Right? So what we're doing there, we're reinforcing instead of retweeting a dunk, instead of
Yeah.
liking a dunk, we're liking
The
civility.
like reconciliation,
Yeah,
basically. The
we're
yeah.
liking and retweeting and encouraging and praising good faith. We're encouraging people to be honest, and instead of people feeling that thing, that, you know, that thing in your stomach. I'm sure you feel it too. I feel it. Like I'm in the middle of an argument, it's heated,
Mm.
and I just realized I'm wrong. I just realized I fucked up,
Mm.
right? Even though I've tried so hard to train
It
myself
still hurts. Like the person
yeah,
you're heated with. Like I have to do it. I have to own that I
yeah,
fucked up. I had that the other day on
there's
like Twitter. The guy was so
exactly,
surprised. He's like, I've never had someone just like. I was like, because I missed him like seeding a premise, and I was like, you're
right,
not even like you're just arguing around an analogy and not like acknowledging
yeah,
this thing. And I was kind of a dick,
mm,
because I am kind of a dick, and he's like, yeah, like I already answered your question. I was like, you didn't answer my question, and I reread it. I'm like, he did actually answer my question,
yeah,
and I just didn't realize it.
right,
He didn't answer directly like a yes or a no, but like it was a sentence, and like I know the answer was like an
yeah,
affirmative where we were like in an agreement on something. My dad was like, "Oh yeah, you're right. You did answer that. My bad, dude. I'm sorry." He's like, "Oh,
yeah.
I was not expecting that. I figured like you were just gonna like block me and never respond." I was like, "I don't care. I care
Yeah,
about being
see,
right and having a good conversation. I don't like
yeah,
who cares. There's
and
30 other people who probably read this."
there's no reason we can't do this. It's not like there's some, you know, mechanism stopping us, right? The only thing stopping us is our will to do it. So like, let's all do it. Let's just all praise good conversation, praise good faith, reasonable um, disagreement,
Mm.
right? Let's praise it. Let's encourage it. Let's like it. When we see that, we retweet it and say, "This is really nice. This is really great."
I'm actually.
That's
I want to pick
that's
your
part
brain.
of
I
the.
want to pick your brain on this. Sorry to interrupt,
Sure.
but it's related. I promise. So I don't like. I think I like we you and I seem to be in 100% agreement that like people need to enjoy being wrong. It's great. Being wrong is awesome. Now you shouldn't want to be wrong, but you should enjoy finding out you're wrong.
Right. Yeah.
So one of my exes, this is 10 years ago. This is not my fault. She's like a QAnoner now. She's pretty crazy. Thanks the whole like election stall, whatever. So like we're like friends on like Instagram or whatever, and like occasionally she'll just post some like Joe Biden's a fascist, and I'll like, all right, let's take the bait. Let's see what's going on here. I don't like yell at her or anything, but she made a claim that like oh, the polling and all this information, like the she's engaging in like the grant the what's it the big lie or whatever, like oh all the polling and everything was wrong. Like in 2016 they said Hillary was going to win by 90%. I was like I'll be charitable, and I'll say you're saying 90% of the polls said he would win or she would win. You just misspoke that. So I gave both versions of it and said like okay if you're telling me she would win by 90%, that's insane. Zero polls will say that.
Right.
And if you're saying 9% of them said she would win, those might have been some high estimates. I think you're cherry picking there, but there were some that probably gave like they had like a high probability. And as the election closed up, the polls tightened, and it was really like a 2/3 chance she would win. But like that doesn't mean that Trump can't win. That's if you play Russian roulette and there's a 20% chance of you getting your brains blown out, you don't think those are good odds. Those are bad odds. Those are very bad odds. It's a very distinct possibility of the thing happening here.
20% happens a lot.
And so our conversation there ended. Like these things last forever, and I was like, I don't know how to. And then so when she restated it, she's like, no, there were specifically polls that said Hillary Clinton would win by 90%. So I already restated this. Like you now know you're saying there's polls saying Hillary Clinton gets 90% of the votes, and I was like, show me the poll, any poll. I will take any poll you can provide me that says this, because I can guarantee you that poll does not exist apart from like maybe a Twitter poll from like CNN or something, like an actually like conducted poll from like a pollster. This poll does not exist. It is impossible that this poll exists. And my goal there isn't to LOL pwned, you're wrong. It's like I want you to like in all of our conversations, I can never get her to admit she was wrong about anything. She'll always like double down and retreat. And my goal is like just admit you're wrong. Like it's okay. Like I want you to. But I don't like. I guess my question here is like, how would you approach? Like, how would you try and get this person to just like, come on, like it's okay to be wrong. Like I'll say stuff like that, but I feel like it still comes off like if I admit I'm wrong, then what? Like, what would you? I don't know.
Yeah, well, it's hard to convince people because of that instinct that we were talking about, right? Everyone has that instinct of doubling down, and it's something that people have to actively fight. So the only way that I've seen it be successful is proving that I'm open to it myself. So, if somebody says, "Oh, but you keep saying this thing, and that's not true," or you said this and whatever, I'll say, "Oh, well, if I said that, then I misspoke. Show me where I said it, and I'll apologize immediately." Right? I've done something like that before.
Yeah.
I've done that a few times where someone says that I've implied something, and I'll say, "Oh, that's not what I think, but show me where I did that, and I'll explain. Like that's not what I think, and I'll apologize." Or people say like
like where you sloppily go through a point and don't explain yourself well. I did that I'm in my final like class for my graduate program, and I sloppily like ran through a sentence about like unconscious biases because it wasn't really the subject of like the topic I was talking about. And so one of the people who responded to me was just like, what do you like misconstrued what I was saying there, and I was like, oh, now I have to like explain what I was saying there because I wasn't clear the first time, but I can understand how it's a reasonable like misinterpretation of what I said. So,
and I mean, part of it is really just finding that opportunity yourself. Like I seek it out. So I seek out people on Twitter, for example, that I disagree with. People I think are smart, but I don't agree with them. Like they're saying stuff and I'm like, I don't know about that. I have the visceral reaction of like, that sounds like bullshit, or I don't like this, right? I lean into it now. It's kind of you can kind of train yourself to do this, right? Where it's like if you're afraid of heights, like you can take that in one direction or the other. So I was afraid of roller coasters, right? And because I was afraid, I forced myself to go on them. Like I'm terrified, and I'm just inching my way up, Skull Mountain or whatever, and I'm terrified, and I'm shaking, and I'm like, I'm still gonna do it. I'm still gonna do it, and I'm forcing myself to put one foot in front of the other
But did you go on
because
King Ka? That's the question.
you know, yeah, that was one of them too. And the only reason that I didn't is because they shut it down. Something
It,
happened in it.
every time. So sorry, because
I
I'm
was
gonna
on the
upload this to
line.
people who don't realize. Like when
Yeah,
he said Skull Mountain, I knew he was talking about Six Flags Great Adventure. It's one of the roller coasters there. It's an indoor roller coaster, I think, right? Yeah, I think
I
that's
don't
what
know.
Skull Mountain is. But
Yeah,
King Ka's is 450-foot roller coaster. That's like the best 30 seconds of your life. And every time I've been there, except one, it was shut down because it always breaks.
yeah, it always breaks. I was online for like 45 minutes or something waiting because it broke once, and we just waited,
Mm.
and then it started again, so we didn't leave, and we kept waiting on the line, and it broke again. We were like, all right, let's just get out of here. We spent like an hour and a half on this. So, but I was gonna do it, even though I was absolutely terrified because that is crazy. That
It's the most exhilarating 45 seconds of your life. I can't confirm. I've only been on it once, and I loved it.
yeah. So I'm down to do it for sure. But the point is that it's like I have a similar kind of thing of like I'm terrified of being wrong because I don't want to do damage, and also yeah, you have that pride thing of you don't want to look like an idiot. But I kind of I set up like a kind of insurance plan for myself, right? Like I tell people, I say it out loud. I say, listen, if I'm wrong, I will
Mhm.
I will tell you. If you think I'm wrong, tell me, and I will admit it if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
And I care about being honest. I care about being forthright. I care about, I just care about making conversation better.
Mhm.
So even if I'm feeling that thing, I'm fucked now because that's my brand, right? Like I've made it my brand, quote unquote, to
Mhm.
be this guy who admits when he's wrong. And if somebody catches me in it and I don't pay, if I don't pay up, now I'm going against this entire thing, and everyone, it's like now everyone's going to think I suck and I'm full of shit, right?
Mhm.
So I've created a social pressure into being honest. And
Mhm.
you can do that for yourself too. Just say, look, I could be wrong about this, and start with that. Just say I could be wrong about this, but this is what I think. People are more amenable to you when you do that, first
I
of
guess
all.
I just don't know how to convince people to also have that value because that's sort of what I ran into in that thing I was trying to pick your brain about. Like, I don't know how to
Yeah.
convince this person to
The
like I can
the
see she's being like really really stubborn and like we're both stubborn and headstrong. I like to think I became less stubborn and less headstrong and
yeah,
maybe I'm just biased. I don't think really she really has. So it's like,
yeah, no.
what do I like? How do I
It's
convince this person like that like
I
this
mean,
fundamental way you engage like is
I don't
weird?
know. I
Yeah,
don't know. I don't know how to do it with someone who's not willing to do it. I don't know if you can,
yeah.
but I do know that
It's
that
possibly it's a too far gone waste of time thing. Maybe they'll have a
maybe
eureka moment. I don't know.
maybe I mean you can just leave the door open, but not necessarily put your money on it, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
kind of what I would do. But like for example, if somebody I engaged with on Twitter and I can see that they're just a brick wall, they're not listening, and I give up,
Mm-hmm.
and then let's say a week later or something, they pop back up and they start commenting. Okay, you have another shot. I'll respond to what you're saying now, and I'll respond to it the same way. And the leading by example thing is the only thing you can really do.
Yeah.
Just embody the thing that you want to see, because that's the only person you can control is yourself. So try to be the pinnacle of that thing.
Yeah. We're
So
diverging from the free speech topic, but I want to make like one other weird so the way I like encountered Dr. Graham, Dr. Rod is through this like weird like bubble, and so like I'm similar to you where I kind of want to talk to people I disagree with. Like I'll be a competitive asshole sometimes if like I feel like the situation warrants it, and sometimes I'll be nice. It really just depends. Like whatever. I'm kind of like I'll put back like whatever I'm getting. So probably not the best mentality, but it's what I do. I don't know. And so that's how I came across like a Rod, and like I'm in this like weird. I don't know how big this like I'll call it the James Lindsay anti woke fucking shit posting circle, and all these fucking people who just like hate like whatever they view wokeism as and like critical race theory, and they just really hate this thing, and a lot of them will espouse like their love of like rationality and like whatever and thinking through stuff, and I'm like, okay, I hear you. And like I'll talk to all these people. I'm like, so how many books on critical race theory have you read? None. Okay.
mhm.
You hate this thing. Like, can you explain it to me? And then I'll get like a weird picture of like something Ibram Kendi said. Like, I
Yeah,
don't even know. However, and it's like
Yeah.
are you really like? Is this rationality? Is this rationality engaging with like image macros instead of like,
Yeah.
a
Well,
paragraph from a book, or like a book, or like
sure.
a full understanding of it? It's just really weird.
I mean, it's, ask how many Christians have read the Bible, right?
Yeah.
Like, there's a Bart Ehrman. He's a professor of theology and stuff. Um, and he asks his students every, he's I think he's at Chapel Hill, and so it's a very religious area. And so he asks his students in the beginning of class, like, how many of you believe in God? They raise their hands. How many of you believe, that God wrote the Bible, like it's the actual literal word of God? And they raise their hand. How many of you have read it? And you get a
Dude, if
few of
you
them,
told me
right?
I could read the literal word of God, I'd do it. And if I believed it
Exactly.
was the actual thing, that's
That's
crazy.
what he says. He's like, and then I think he asked them, like, how many of you have read the Da Vinci Code? And they all raise their hand, right? And he's like, all right, well, I understand why you would want to read a book like the Da Vinci Code, but if you think God wrote a book, wouldn't you want to read the whole thing, right? Like most people just no, I read this and I read that,
Just get the
and
audiobook of it. Come on.
right, and but that's the way it works, right? Like it's now a tribe. It's now
Mhm.
the James Lindsay thing. Like that's a tribe of people, and not all of them have they're not honestly engaging with this. They intuitively agree with certain things and they fall in with that side. And then there are people on the woke side that just intuitively fall in with certain things and they agree with that side. And they just become more and more polarized and
Yeah.
it just becomes that horseshoe thing.
It's weird, like seeing, well, because like, so the first person I was talking about, like my ex or whatever, like she doesn't proclaim. Actually, she does use the language of like rationale and logic. It's very, very odd. But like I see a lot of these people like claim that these are the things they value and like condemn things that they view as illiberal, but like I don't feel like they can adequately like explain these concepts. Like I could tell you what I think liberalism is and like why I value liberalism or why I value like socialism or whatever. I could tell you like why I like certain concepts here. And I feel like it almost just like hits the wall on that, because like I'm like, oh well, let's talk about these things. Well, why do we hold these things value? And I don't know, I just don't get responses. It's very, very odd.
Well, it's just people aren't operating on that level usually.
Mm-hmm.
Most people are operating on an emotional level. They're responding to things emotionally
Yeah.
and then they've later find a framework, an intellectual rational framework to explain what they already believed and already felt. It takes a lot to break out of that and actually start from zero and build yourself up and adopt the things that work and reject the things that don't work. And it's I understand it because it's hard,
Mm-hmm.
right? So part of the reason that I am who I am is because I didn't fit in anywhere. I couldn't fake it and I couldn't convince people that I was part of the thing. And so even if I was kind of in on something, I would still be a kind of odd man out, right? So even with like my ethnicity, right? Like I'm Dominican. I'm trying to hang out with the Spanish kids in school. They're from all over the place, but it just didn't something didn't click, right? We're like I'm thinking in my head, we're the same, like your grandma's my grandma, and I understand, the language, we understand the food and the culture. There's so much commonality, but there were certain things we didn't have in common that clashed. Like they're all listening to this isn't 1997, 1998, so they're all listening to like Puff Daddy and the Family and like Mace and all that crap, and I didn't like it. I was listening to Led Zeppelin,
Mm-hmm.
right? And they never even heard of that before. And if they heard it, they would say, "What is this?" Right? So there was just a disconnect there, and there's countless examples of that. And what happened with that is it forced me to make myself, so to speak. Like I couldn't just fall into a group. I couldn't just fall into an identity. I couldn't just go to Hot Topic and get your goth starter kit and just like it didn't work. I couldn't fit in anywhere. And so I had to just be myself. And it sucked. It was so hard. It was so painful. It was so rough. I was miserable all the time. And I'm better off for it, I
Hey
think.
man,
But
pressure
man,
pressure creates diamonds, right?
right. Well, I'm not a diamond at all, but I think I'm better off for it because I'm an independent minded person now. Like the fact that I couldn't take any of those shortcuts actually ended up helping me.
Mm.
And I see the people who could take the shortcuts because they were just good enough to make it into, this squad or this clique or whatever. And there's a ton of work that they never did on themselves. And they're kind of, they end up lost. They end up making terrible mistakes because they're just doing what they're supposed to do and they're not really thinking. So I had to suffer a lot, but I'm in retrospect, I'm glad I did it. I wouldn't wish it upon anyone, but I think there are easier ways we can facilitate that sort of thing instead of just leaving people out in the wilderness to just fucking figure it out.
Yeah.
But the point is, like, we can. It's hard to do, and I understand why people don't do it. I understand why people don't. It doesn't even occur to them that it exists, right? They're just going with their gut, and if what works works, and they stay with what works. Nobody wants to be uncomfortable. Nobody wants to suffer that sort of thing, right? Nobody wants to give up their friends. It
Mm.
takes a real strength of character to do something like that. Like you grew up in church group or whatever, and it's your entire life. It was every weekend of your childhood. And then somewhere around high school, you stop believing in God. What are you going to do? That's rough, man. You're going to stop
Yeah.
talking to all these people. You're going to stop hanging out with them. You're going to have to forge your own identity. And, of course, one thing that happens is you just jump to the other pole, right? So then you just hang out with the atheist kids, and then that's the thing that connects you, and you're still doing the same thing just in the other direction. You're still not working on yourself. It's so much harder to take that middle road
Mhm.
and just say, you know what, fuck your group, fuck your group, fuck your group, fuck groups, fuck
uh,
groups.
I used to
I'm
be
just gonna
the
do
anti-religious like edgy atheist type, and I'm happy that part of me got shedded, because it's weird to just define yourself in like opposition to something. Like there's like an element where they're like, oh, it's because you hate God. It's like, no, I don't hate God. I fucking hated you, and that was wrong too. But it's not that I hated God. It's that like I found you people
yeah.
so fundamentally annoying that like
I went through that
yeah.
thing. I mean, I still like agree with everything that I would say at the time.
Mhm.
Um,
It's not that I think I was wrong, I guess. It's more like that I was wrong to say like, oh, like you're ridiculous, or like your beliefs are like silly or whatever. It's more like there are like, for example, one of the ways I like reach out to like conservatives when I talk to them is like I'm pretty left leaning. I think we should have an economy based around the family, and like, well, caring about like your family is a pretty conservative value. Okay, and like I don't necessarily view it in a conservative way where like the women should stay home, but I think like we should have an economy where one person can stay home, or both people can work 15 hours a week and like raise a family, right?
okay.
And this sort of goes back into something we were talking about like a while ago. Where hold on, I had a note here about it. Basically, like where people get into like conspiratorial things, they don't have like meaning or purpose in their life. Basically, where
Yeah.
like they feel like they have access to some sort of hidden truth because they like for whatever reason they feel like unfulfilled, right? I want to like create a society that like its main focus is to enable like human self-actualization to like whatever extent we can have it, right? Spend time with
Yeah.
your family, spend time with your loved ones, like having a society oriented around family. And like old school conservatism was that. It was a counterbalancing force to like this ridiculous capitalism. And now we have like the Republican Party that sort of fused like the worst parts of conservatism and the worst parts of capitalism into like one political party that is just like
Yeah.
stupid. But,
I mean, like, yeah, again, like, I understand why they exist and they do
Mhm.
have a utility, but
I
generally,
disagree on that other part, but
no, no, no. Generally speaking, my attitude is fuck labels and fuck groups
yeah.
because it just always leads to a problem. I haven't found a single one where, you know, I don't feel the need at some point to just be like, all right, I'm out. You guys,
Mhm.
no. You know what I mean? No matter who they are, no matter what they're doing. And kind of talking about what you mentioned, like the moment I realized it about you don't want to leave one group and just jump into another group. You want to actually do the work of becoming
Mhm.
yourself, and it's hard. Um, was when I realized that like when I discovered that there's such a thing as like atheist rock,
What?
right? So like everybody knows about Christian rock, right?
Yeah. I
It's
actually like
super
Christian rock,
cheesy.
oddly enough.
It's like super cheesy, and it's lame and whatever, right? And everybody makes fun of it. And then there's actually like the inverse. There's actually atheist rock where like there's a band and they're atheist and that's what they write about and that's what they play about and that's what their band is about. And that's also lame. That's also really corny. It's not the same as like
Cringe.
yeah, like it's not the same as a band and then they have a few songs where they write about religion or whatever. That's fine. That's a separate thing. But when that's what your band is about, Your whole band is about I don't believe in God. Now I'm going to tell you why. It's corny. It's so lame.
Yeah.
And for some reason that clicked in my head, and I went, okay, this is all stupid. I'm just
I'm on
I'm
the
not joining
opposite
any
side of
groups.
stupid.
Yeah, I'm not joining any groups. I'm the Groucho Marx thing. I want to be any club that will have me as a member. That's my thing. I would, it's not like, rugged individualism. I believe only in individuals, and there are group identities. I have a group identity and all that sort of stuff, but you are always engaging with an individual anyway. At the end of the day, you're engaging with an individual whose identity groups intersect uniquely, right? And it's important to keep that in mind, and I think it's better for you to recognize that you do reduce to an individual. You are a part of all these larger things, and that's important to keep in mind too, but you definitely reduce to an individual, and you should be treated that way, and you should think of yourself that way,
Hmm.
because it avoids a lot of this groupthink shit. I think, like the James Lindsay stuff, the woke stuff, and the political stuff, they're being used as surrogates for that religious thing that people are missing,
Yeah.
right? And that's bad, because those are really bad things to turn into a dogma, you
What's
know?
it's funny is like it's actually like fascism that made me realize like, oh, I guess religion's not too bad, right? Because I was one of the
No,
people
it
that's like,
totally is. It totally is.
wait,
It
what?
totally is, because it's a set of nonsense beliefs. We can do so much better than that.
Well. So my thing was I used to attribute like all the bad things. Oh, all these irrational people. It's because of religion. Like, no, no, no. I'm doing the chicken and the egg problem here, right? Like,
Mm.
religion is because people are stupid and like by default. Sorry, people are stupid by default. Like they fall into things like that, and that's why like maybe some like dogmatic religions exist. But that's not the fault of the religion. The religion is a symptom, not the problem in and of itself. And it was like running into like atheist, like the atheist, like far right, like people, where I'm just like, oh, okay, it's not just religion; it's just a whole host of like reactionary tendencies that
Well,
just manifest in populations.
it's dogma. That's the
Yeah.
problem, right? Religions are dogma. Insofar as you can't question them,
Mm.
you know, what is it? It's, I would rather have questions that can't be answered than answers that can't be questioned, right?
Yeah. Huh.
And that's what religion is, right? Like, I can't ask you this, right? They say we question our faith all the time. I heard that all the time, but it's bullshit. It's We question our faith all the time as long as you end up
Mm.
here.
Yeah.
So that's it's dishonest there, and there is no questioning it. You can't question it, because you'll eventually you'll make your way out, But the problem is dogma, right? Religions are dogma, and people's political ideologies at this point are becoming dogma, and that's bad. Dogma is bad. Having beliefs that cannot be questioned, that cannot be criticized, that's bad.
Yeah.
And getting back to the free speech thing, that's the point. Is that should be everybody's fundamental principle, is no, you can criticize the idea, chop it up, go ahead, take a machete to it, and just hack away, go ahead. And if it sucks, if it doesn't survive, good. That should be our attitude, and we should
Mm.
try to foster that attitude. But the critical component there is that there must be something underneath it that is bolstering everything, because if your political ideology is your religion, quote unquote,
Mm.
that's going to be so much harder to criticize. It's going to be so much harder, right? You need to have something else to take that spot, so that your political ideology doesn't become that.
Yeah, I think it's weird to get tied to like labels and like the groups like that. Like I have certain ideas. I'm not non-ideological. I think it's weird when people try and pretend they don't have like an ideology. Like I have an ideology, but the
Of
ideology
course.
is more or less based around like I want human being like as many people to be like I want as much happiness for as many people as possible. That's the
Same.
core I work from, and then I try and like
Same.
build positions based off of that.
Yeah,
And
same.
it's like that's it. Like that's the end all be all. Like you show me a system that works better, then I want that system, and like
Right.
that's literally all it is. And then
And
like from that, I adopt like other like political like ideas
right.
that like will fall within a label, but I don't care about that label. I care about like what like the ideas, sorry, the utilitarian good that can be derived from the ideas associated with that political label. That's what I care about, not
Yeah.
like the label itself. Like I don't care.
Yeah.
Um,
So I don't spend a lot of time calling myself whatever.
mm,
It just seems like a waste of time, because I don't care, first of all, but mostly it's because every person you say that to is going to think
Mhm.
something different.
Yeah, it's not. Although
A waste of time.
there's like a political Discord I sort of like moderate a little bit, like a very tiny one for like a friend of mine. Basically, he makes like YouTube content. He's vaguely conservative, I guess, but he's really fun to talk to. And the community has is like really good. And like I'm like, yeah, this server is never gonna have political roles on it ever. Don't care. You want to know what someone believes? You talk to them. There's not going to be like you at 800 tags talking about how you're an atheist, polytheist, like whatever the fuck. I don't give a shit. You're not getting it. You talk to people, you discuss whatever ideas you care about. I'm not going to have people like bogged down with like 20 different weird like labels that you prejudge them on. Like, fuck it.
Yeah. So,
Um,
I think we're on the same page. That's definitely the fundamental place where I'm coming from. And I actually think that whether they know it or not, that's where the vast majority of people are coming from.
mm,
Everybody thinks that what they believe is going to lead to the best world,
mm,
right? And some people are really wrong about that. But that's what most people think, right? Everyone is the hero of their own story. Everyone believes that what they're doing is just and right and good, no matter what it is, right? Even like the Taliban. The Taliban thinks that what they're doing, they're 100% sure that what
mm.
they're doing is exactly the right thing to do.
Are
White
you saying
supremacists.
9/11 was justified?
No,
Just fucking with
but
you.
yeah, in their minds, it
Mhm.
absolutely was, right? And white supremacists, same thing. Like if you ask them,
Like, well, yeah, white
they'll
genocide's happening, and genocide's bad. Therefore, we're
yeah,
justified in all the crazy shit we do to stop white
and
genocide from
they'll
happening.
exactly, and they'll explain to you why they think
Mm.
what they think is going to lead to the best world. They're just wrong, right? But we have that fundamental thing in common, and I think that that's a place where we can connect
Mhm.
and build from, right?
There's there's
That's the
one
star manning thing again.
yeah there's one other thing I guess like we're approaching on 2 hours, so I don't want to keep you too much longer. But there's one other thing I kind of wanted to like talk about that there's time I wanted to bring it up earlier, but I guess just as appropriate now to sort of like capstone or cap off the conversation. That I sort of I like to have as minimal coercion on like your freedom as possible, but I understand that like freedom is not like you let people do whatever they want, right? So if you had the freedom to murder me, that would probably be an imposition on my ability to freely walk throughout the world, right? If you had the freedom to drunk drive, it would impose on my perceived freedom to go out and drive just because I know how risky that behavior is now. So like I feel like I want to understand freedom from a collectivist lens. I want to maximize the individual freedoms from like a collective framework is usually how I sort of describe it.
Mm-hmm.
um, and I think like if I want to like mitigate coercive like influences, I have to realize, or to me, I feel like one of the worst things is when you get trapped in a prison whose bars you can't see. And what I mean by that is the way people can use like misinformation, and particularly stuff that's like designed to be very incendiary, to get you into that like effective override where like you can't critically think, and it's to me that's abusive, and it's that in and of itself is an imposition on your freedom. Trump, like for example, I probably almost went down like the reactionary route like 5 years ago. Like there was a moment where I probably could have flipped and gone either way. I was like, oh, there's Steven Crowder guy, he's pretty funny, like weird stuff like that. Where I'm like, oh god, in hindsight, like please kill me. Um, but like I can see how people can end up in positions like that. And I think I think by allowing misinformation in the name of freedom, you're destroying another type of freedom, the freedom to like go through society not behind like mental bars. Like when you're exposing people to stuff that basically puts them in their own mind prison where they can't think freely, they're like overwhelmed by these repetitive narratives that are true or not true, and then engages in like extreme narrative building and extreme like propaganda seems to undermine your ability to be like this free and clear like individual to really develop. I think you put it well, like doing your own work to like become yourself, to not fall into group A or to fall into group B, to think
Yeah.
through things, decide what you value, and go through that. And I think like misinformation in my thing, I need to balance these two freedoms basically. Your right to say what you want to say and do what you want to do, and my right to like not be inundated with information that like I might not have the ability to necessarily assess in a moment, right? I remember I watched I think it was like a Mark Levin thing for like 20 minutes before I realized, oh shit, the person he's talking to is fucking insane. There's something about this guy who was like he's like the national director of energy, whatever, and it seemed legitimate because I don't know anything. I don't really know a whole lot about science, and And this guy was talking about how, like, we have this threat from like an EMP going off and destroying our electrical grid. Our electrical grid's very insecure. Now I know Mark Levin is a piece of shit and crazy, but I don't know this guy from a hole in the fucking wall. And he's saying these things that sound scientific in terms. He's got a cool label that makes him seem official.
Mm-hmm.
And because of my like background and a lot of reading I've done about like anti-government extremism and conspiracies, he said something that I heard it and I knew what you were saying, but it's not clear unless you know what they're talking about, what he was saying. And I was like, hold on, what the fuck's the deal with this guy? And I look into him like, oh, he's a crazy conspiracy theorist. His group name was like the National Institute, or sorry, it sounded like it was like the department. It was the Defense of Energy, whatever. And it sounded like it was an official government thing, but it wasn't. It was just what he named his group so that he sounded like official. And what caught me here is like, I feel abused. You disarm me with your words that sounded official. This was only like a year ago. I like listened to this. Like, you disarm me with your words that sound official. You disarm me with your title, and you said these things that sounded like vaguely plausible. And then I find out you've been lying to me this whole fucking time. And there's something that feels wrong about that, where someone just lied to me, like changed my perspective on a given topic, and then like, they fortunately, like for me, there was like, I've done a lot of reading about like domestic, like right-wing domestic terrorism. So I'm like, oh wait, I caught on to that. Hang on. And then like I went down the rabbit hole, found out who this fucking dude was and how he was associated with. He's like, oh, he worked with Congress to develop plans to like deal with this. And what that actually meant. Sorry, I'm on a fucking rant now. But what it actually meant when I went down the rabbit hole was there was this one crazy congressman who chaired a committee and hired him as like a professional. Before this congressman retired, and then fucked off into the middle of the woods where he lives completely off grid because he this was his association with Congress. This was not like a congressional body calling him to testify or whatever, but he made it sound like he was official. But it was like, yeah, you sort of were, but only because this one insane person in Congress like hired you to do this crazy thing before fucking off into the woods for the rest of his life. Like, and it's like there's something that felt coercive, like just by having this person present themselves as legitimate authority on a topic and present things to me that I could feel like I'm supposed to be able to trust, and then not, and then that not actually being the case,
Yeah, I mean, I totally sympathize with that desire. Like, bullshit is really bad, mm-hmm. and bullshit is everywhere, and it would be really nice if people didn't succumb to bullshit. Yeah. The only thing is that I just don't think the solution is to try to get rid of bullshit.
Well, I think there needs to be a balance between these two freedoms, right? That the right to freedom of speech in this instance needs to be regulated in such a way that it doesn't lead to the destruction of all of our other rights. Like, we didn't get to talk about it, but I was going to talk about how like like a minor historical lesson, I guess, like Weimar Germany had robust free speech laws, and that's where the Nazis came from. Like
I don't see, but that's the thing. Like,
it's more complicated than just that.
There's way more than just that. It wasn't just the free speech. There was tons of stuff going on that led to that, right? If it wasn't just people being able to say whatever they wanted.
Well, but Hitler is like very known for being like a charismatic speaker and like rallying the troops and spreading like that misinformation. And one of the studies I had, I don't remember if I sent it to you, but it's like basically a study that analyzing like where the Nazis controlled like radio waves and were able to spread like their propaganda is where like the Nazi party flourished the most, basically. Like they're using that as a medium for like communication is like bad,
That makes perfect sense. Mm-hmm. I remember you in the response video that you made to Rod's video, mm-hmm. you mentioned that. And yeah, like that, I can totally see that, but there's way more going on there, and I think it's wrong to blame it on the fact that
I didn't mean to dumb it down to just that. Like, there's a whole lot going on there, but
that's part of it. But the thing is, there's no mechanism that you could try to put in place to fix that will either work, or if it does work, it might work too well, in the sense that, what information gets silenced and what information you end up not hearing and not even knowing that was, prohibited from you.
I think
what dependent upon, whoever the hell is in charge, and how do they decide, and who gets to decide who they are. And it becomes a mess. That's the problem.
It's at a certain point we have to like draw these lines, and like we do that, right? Like we don't invite like I don't know, Brenton Tarrant or whatever. I think he's the guy who shot up like, I don't know, those two mosques in am I getting the right name? I think that's his name. Like we don't invite him on CNN or whatever, put him on some news program where he gets to express like, well, why he did it and like what he thinks, like that. But like Richard Spencer,
Well,
they let on some like
I
news stuff.
I can't see a reason for it, but they do have stuff where like on HBO they'll go interview the Iceman,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because the context is different. It's more of like, let me understand this very, it's a morbidly fascinating person,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I understand the desire, and I share it, but I think that the only good way to do it is to have it be like a social thing. Like, we don't like dishonesty, we don't like bullshit, and I'm going to argue with you and I'm going to point it out. So if you can be as charismatic as you want, but if you're full of shit, I'm going to call you on it.
Mm-hmm.
And I will dedicate my life to calling you on it. If you are somebody who's extremely, you know, um, if I think that what you're saying is super harmful, I might start, a group to like actively combat everything you're saying, and provide people with the other side of the info and be as honest as I possibly can. And I know that not every battle is going to be won. I know that you're still going to get people believing bullshit because that person had the opportunity to speak, but the alternatives lead to worse things, in my opinion. Where not only do those people that you're trying to stop still get their information out there somehow, they'll figure out some way, and some people will figure out some way to get it if they want it. But you do stop honest people from saying things that maybe the people in charge disagree with for ideological reasons, even if they're right.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they just don't like it. Maybe they think that it'll damage their reputation, or it'll hurt this system, or it'll fuck up the stock market or something. But it's something that somebody should be able to say and that people should be able to hear. I would just rather hear bullshit
Mm-hmm.
and deal with it, to make sure that I'm also hearing the truth from the people who want to say it. And it's a trade-off, and I get it, but I would rather just keep those things open. It's just, every time that I think about coming up with some kind of mechanism, I just think, all right, what if the worst human being on earth was in charge of this? What would they do? And I don't like the answer to that question.
I guess if you like quick hypotheticals, so like hypothetically, I said like, we ban Jewish blood. Okay, this is an example I gave the guy on Twitter where I misunderstood his response. If we ban Jewish blood libel, just like you're not allowed to spread Jewish blood libel conspiracy, which basically like the Jews kidnap Christian babies, sacrifice them for whatever. This is part of Nazi conspiracy theories about Jews. Like hypothetically, if you ban that, 80% less Jews die in the Holocaust. Would you do it?
I mean,
there's no other ramifications. There's just these two things. You do that. That's the only causal thing to it. Yeah, just super simple.
I don't know. I mean, yeah, the obvious answer is, well, of course, I'm going to save as many human beings as possible. But like, I think that that's an unrealistic hypothetical, because.
Well, the point is to test like rules. Like, do you care more about? So, like, my freedom, my value for freedom of speech is downstream from my caring about like the general well-being of like people. So if the free speech is causing harm to humans, well, then like I need to limit the free speech in such a way so that it maximizes utility, not causes whatever, however many Jews to die.
But that's the thing. The thing is that it's never that simple. It's never free speech is causing harm to humans.
Well, so I can't make an absolute statement like that, but like I can make a probabilistic argument about how propaganda works and how it like I could make like a very strong argument. I didn't really do it here a lot. I like gave parts of it, but about how demonization functions, about how it justifies harm by putting yourself as the victim, right? Like, isn't it weird you see all these white people saying how like they're the victims in American society, like well, that's part of demonization, right? You tell yourself that you're the victim, and if you're the victim, you're justified in fighting back. Like that's what self-defense is, right? That's why I can go like murder Hispanics in an El Paso Walmart,
Totally understandable. Yeah, totally understandable.
So like I can make a pretty strong argument for having some sort of restriction on that because of how I think that the medium works. Like I could make that argument, but I guess the
Yeah.
question is like if I could make that argument persuasively, then I would maybe go down the contours of like what arguments would you accept, to what degree would I have to demonstrate it, and then like whatever. And it
Yeah.
might be hard to do. I might not be able to meet your burden of proof for that, but
Right.
it's more or less just making sure that like freedom of speech comes downstream from human well-being, and that like that I guess
That's
is what I'm
yeah. I
checking.
mean, I think that the fundamental issue there is just that human well-being and free speech are intertwined. You need one for the other. That's the way that I
Mhm.
see it. And even though, yes, some people spreading bad ideas is going to lead to harm, the only corrective to that that doesn't also lead to terrible harm is to allow people to say whatever stupid shit they want to say and to allow other people to be able to respond to it and to just um, let people hash it out. And if it evolves to the point where people are now committing crimes, well, now these are crimes, these are behaviors,
Mhm.
and we have regulations for that. You can't do that. You can say whatever the hell you want. The KKK can march if they want. Let them
Mhm.
march. Let them have their stupid parade. I don't care. But the minute they start vandalizing, the minute they start fighting somebody, they're now committing a crime, and we stop them there. So you have the right to express whatever nonsense you want, but if that nonsense leads to behavior, then we do something about that. And that's not a perfect system. It's not going to completely eliminate harm, but I would rather that and err on that side, because I think that any attempt to control that thing will lead to more harm. And depending on, it's just always goes back to like, yeah, maybe if Superman's in charge, then it's totally fine. He can police everybody because I
Mhm.
trust Superman. But most people are not Superman, right? Most people are just people. And I don't necessarily trust their agenda. I don't trust their incentives. I don't trust their temperament. I don't trust their necessarily just their outlook. Like if it were up to certain people, uh, you know, certain things that I write and certain movies that I watch would be banned. And it's like,
Mhm.
well, you can't fucking take that away from me.
Well,
It
I
just, it becomes something that is subject to the whim of whoever it is who gets to decide. And I just don't trust that. It's so much better to leave it open source, even though that's not perfect and there's going to be damage.
do you acknowledge, or do you think there is a distinction? I should say, should you acknowledge? That sort of loads it. Do you think there's a distinction between saying that I don't think we should punish an individual for being wrong, right? So, like, if you want to walk around screaming about Jewish blood libel on the street corner, like, whatever, I don't give a fuck, right?
Well, I
Um,
mean, I give a fuck,
oh,
but
you know what I
you
mean?
can
Like,
do
I
it.
don't want to like illegally like punish you or prevent you from
Right.
doing that, really,
Yeah.
unless it's like violating some other ordinance, like a noise complaint violation or something like that.
Yeah.
Um, if like I would agree with that, but I think there's a distinction between punishing an individual and telling someone like you can't like go on, or Tucker Carlson can't just be talking about how the Jews will not replace us or something like that.
Mm.
Like there's a grand Jewish plot. Like, do you think there's a distinction between those, saying like when and how you could say things? Like when you're like, to me, like Fox News in this instance or whatever, or Tucker Carlson would represent like an institution, and I think I can be brutal towards those institutions while being sympathetic to those who might subscribe to them.
Well, I mean, am I brutal towards the Catholic Church, even though I'm sympathetic to the people who believe in, Catholicism, and they're observant and they're trying their best to do what they believe, even though I think the people at the top are feeding them total bullshit?
Mm,
Yeah, I'm gonna be really hostile to the ideas and the institution, and I think the Catholic Church, like the Vatican, like it's fucking insane, right? But they're free to do it. Tucker Carlson is a version of that in my mind. He has a huge platform, he has many
mm,
followers, but he's no different than any other, religious lunatic spouting nonsense. And he's free to do it, and people are free to listen to it, and we're free to criticize it and combat it. And if it ever moves from that point into any kind of action, then we respond to that action with the rules that we have, because actions are different.
yeah.
Um, so that's the way that I see it. Yeah, I don't like the guy. I think he's a douche, and I think that he says a lot of bullshit. But he's free to do it, and people are free to listen to it if they want to. I wish they wouldn't. I wish they would listen to other things, or at least I wish they would listen to other things in addition, right? I wish we could try to, um, try to encourage a desire to like, all right, let me just hear what CNN is saying, just so I can hear both, right?
Mm.
Just giving people that instinct. Like we can train people to do that. We can encourage people to do that. And it starts by not polarizing yourself.
Well, we
By
used to have
not,
laws requiring that. The fairness doctrine's like an old thing. I don't know if I mentioned that to you, but
yeah,
it required you give both sides of an issue,
right,
which I think is not the greatest thing. Like I kind of criticized that before, right? Like the two sides of like, does tobacco cause cancer, right? So I did criticize that, but I think that's better than where we are now, where you have
yeah,
political like commentary, which is like Tucker Carlson masquerading as news.
yeah, yeah. And I mean, it's television, it's entertainment primarily. So you're getting your news, but you're getting entertainment first.
Yeah.
That's just the way the medium works. Um, Neil Postman, Amusing Ourselves to Death. I recommend that book to everybody. It was published the year I was born, and it could have been written last week.
You said Neil Postman?
Neil Postman, yeah, and it's called Amusing Ourselves to Death. Um, and it'll really help you understand the way things work right now. Like the dude was brilliant, but um, yeah, it's just I get that it sucks. I get that it's annoying. Believe me, I hate bullshit, but they're free to do it, and they
Yeah.
have to remain free to do it because their freedom to do that is my freedom to challenge it. It's the same. And as long as they can spout the bullshit they spout, I know that I'm free to challenge it, and I'm free to say, you know, other things that maybe the people who I agree with won't like, Even if I'm wrong, I still get to say it, and I think it's important, right? So I forget who said it, and I think it was Lenny Bruce, but he's like, if you prevent people from saying the word fuck, you're preventing people from saying fuck the government.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really important that we can say that, right? So that's what's beautiful about this place, this country. That's what I love about this idea is even criticism of the institution itself, even criticism of the country itself. I wrote a piece about this a while ago, but the thing about the American flag that I love is that you can't destroy it because the act of destroying it reifies what it means. So you can set the American flag on fire, and all you're doing is proving what the American flag represents.
Huh. I actually like that turn of phrase. That's real, or like not in the turn of phrase, but like that's a strong way to say it, to like indemnify that or whatever. To
Yeah,
like one of my coworkers or whatever was like, "Oh, why aren't you watching Super Bowl?" He goes, "Oh, I don't watch that." I'm like, "Oh, why?" He's like, "Well, because I kneel for the flag or whatever, or the anthem." And like, I'm like, "Okay, dude, like whatever." I wasn't trying to like get into a debate in the middle of like a shift change or whatever, but it was like I think it's an interesting way to like approach that. Where like actually like these things actually reaffirm like our freedoms, not like
yeah.
attack like
The
what we
fact that you
believe in.
can, the fact that you can kneel during the anthem without getting a bullet to the head,
Mm-hmm.
the fact that you can just put your finger up in the air when the Star Spangled Banner is playing,
Yeah.
that proves the point. And all the people who fought for it, like if I understand why they feel the way they feel and why they
Um,
you know
just to
react the way.
clarify, like I've always used like a form of that argument, but I think your version of it is much more rhetorically effective because it's saying you can't destroy the American flag because the act of destroying it is
Yeah,
endorsing the American flag. I think that like
yeah.
logically flipping that is
It,
extremely powerful.
I mean,
Um,
it's just it's the only thing. It's the only one that's like that too,
mm,
because America is the only place. It's the only country that is an idea before it is a chunk of land and a group of
yeah,
people, right? Because we are a whole mix of people. We're a bunch of immigrants mixing together. We're a bunch of cultures mixing together. We're a bunch of flags. Like people put up their mother country flag, but we it's an idea. Japan is not like that, right?
mm,
India is not like that. India is about it's a people. It's a particular chunk of land, right? And that's what it's about. And the pissing on that symbol is different than pissing on the American flag. Pissing on the American flag just proves that America is America. And every time you do it, so that's what I mean is like all these veterans and all these people who get upset, they should be proud. When Colin Kaepernick takes a knee, or when he took a knee, when all
mm.
these other people take a knee, When people set the American flag on fire, they should smile. They go,
Mhm.
yeah, I fought for that. I fought for you to be able to do that and not get a bullet to the head.
Mhm.
Like, all you're doing by doing that is proving what I fought for.
Yeah.
You're proving to me that I won. That's the way that I think people should look at it, because that's what the symbol is. It
Mhm.
symbolizes freedom, and you can't destroy a symbol for freedom, right? The
Yeah.
only way the only way to like disrespect the flag, the only way to disrespect a symbol for freedom is to try to stop anybody from doing whatever they want with it.
Yeah. Huh.
Turn it into a bikini, put it, have it be a beach towel, make it as a doormat, whatever you want. All you're doing is proving the point. So I forgot how we even got on this tangent,
It was a good
but
one though. I enjoyed it.
but but that's the thing. Yeah, like the freedom of speech, the freedom of expression is so ingrained in this idea, and it's so fundamental to this idea. We need it so desperately that we're just going to have to figure out how to deal with the negative aspects of it. When people, the bullshit that comes up, we're just going to have to get good at dealing with it.
Hmm.
But we can never try to like make it go away. It's not going to.
Cool, man. Well, we're over the 2 hour mark, and I wanna keep all your time. Though I'm having fun. So let's do
All right,
like
man.
some I guess like closing thoughts real quick, and say our
Uh,
goodbyes.
no, I think I said a lot.
Yeah, I feel like we're into the prolonged closing remarks for the last little while. I guess the last little like thing that I didn't really like express is one of my favorite books is How Fascism Works by Jason Stanley. It's a really, really, really great book.
Oh yeah, I know Jason.
Did you read the book, or just
No,
familiar
I
with him
haven't.
on like Twitter or whatever?
Yeah, I'm just familiar with
Um,
him on Twitter.
so the book is really good. It's short. I think it's like 250 pages. It's not big, and it flows really well. And the book got a lot, like it has a mixed review on like fascism or whatever, or sorry, the people talking about it, because a lot of people analyze historical from like a historical lens, like how these movements develop over time, and his take was different. It's like fascism isn't like these steps or whatever. It's a mode of doing politics. And I think he gives you a very powerful way to sort of understand like how these movements build, like in the rhetorical ways that they try and build power structures. And I thought that like lens of analysis was like really good. And I think he made this point in an interview I listened of his recently, and he's like, the scariest part of fascism is not when it's like how abnormal it is; it's how it gets normalized. Because no society like nowadays like understands or no one's going to like willingly accept fascism, right? The problem is that it seems like such a far out concept that we can't understand it when it's encroaching on like our lives or our freedom. That it's not the presence of it, it's the normalization of fascism that's the most terrifying, because when it's normalized is when you start entering that, which I think is like where we've been heading towards recently. I think that's where a lot of my criticisms on like, or my views on free speech come from,
Mm.
where it's like,
Well,
yeah, to just like
interesting.
tie that all back together, because it's like we need to have systems that perpetuate freedom. If a right collapses in on itself to where if you have a system that enables fascism to like come into focus, right? Well, when fascism takes power, you lose all those rights anyway. So if you have a system that enables fascism to come into power, then you have a system that's fundamentally self-defeating. So all these
Well,
rights
don't.
exist to perpetuate themselves, and that's sort of like how I
Yeah,
like wind it
yeah. I
all in
remember. I
together.
remember you saying that in your other video. But
Mm.
that's the thing, though. Like, don't do their work for them. If we, if we, if we maintain that no matter what, free speech is sacrosanct, we cannot remove that. That is a bulwark against this whole thing. Like, you can say whatever you want, but you can't stop anybody else from saying what they want about it. And that's the way it is. And everyone just holds that line. I mean, if someone does a military takeover, the free speech is not going to stop them. But
Mm.
but I think that you know fascism can come in many shapes and sizes, many different colors.
Mm.
Could be red, could be blue. Um, and everyone thinks that they're doing the right thing. Everyone is, uh, there's a I'm a big Superman fan. As you can see, there's a comic book called Red Sun where it's like a what if kind of thing.
Mm.
So, what if instead of landing in Kansas, what if Superman's rocket ship landed in the USSR? And so
Mm.
he grows up and he's like a Russian Superman, right? And he's coming from that place. He was raised by those people, and so he has those values. And there's a thing where um, the last remaining city from Krypton was shrunk into a little bottle. So like it's called Kandor, and it's like this tiny city that was shrunk. So there's all these people inside. It's in a bottle, and he keeps it, and he keeps it safe because it's the last vestiges of his homeworld, right? And he starts, taking over the world. He starts imposing the Soviet Union's stuff, and his desire is still the same. He's still Superman in that way, where he wants to help people, right? But he's helping people through the lens of the Soviet Union. So what is he doing? He's controlling everything. He's controlling everyone. He's forcing people to behave a certain way. He's forcing people to live a certain way. And everyone's terrified of him. But he loves everyone. He's trying to help, right? And Lex Luthor, he's still the villain, but he's kind of the hero in this story because of the way the dynamics are. He shuts Superman down with one sentence. He writes him a note, and he just says, "Why don't you just keep the whole world in a bottle?" And that's when Superman realizes that he's been wrong this entire time, that he can't do this. He can't do it this way. What he's saving is being destroyed by the way he's trying to save it.
No.
And I think that is the thing that we all need to keep in mind. So like I understand I understand the impetus, I understand the desire to help people and to mitigate harm by stopping people from saying this hurtful stuff, by trying to mitigate this speech that might lead to really ugly places. But you're actually helping to realize the hell you're trying to prevent without realizing it. Like, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. It's that seems like the exact center of the bullseye that they were getting at when whoever it was said that. Like you're trying so hard to do the right thing and to save people from harm that you end up harming them anyway. So, and that's the problem. And I think we're better off just letting people get hurt a little bit, doing our best to mitigate that in other ways, but leaving the playing field as open as possible.
Well, see, I think that was your conclusion right there. That's perfect. That was powerful. I liked it. Cool. Well, I'm gonna play a little outro thing.